12 o'clock on your Friday afternoon. Welcome in. It is now the halftime show. Tyler Head still along with you. The great Mike Uva making his way into the studio right as we get rolling here. A little bit of a busy day for Mike. We'll dive into that in just a second here, but allow me, if nobody else has already done it, Mike, to wish you a happy first day of camp as you guys were out there this morning, and we finally get to talk about some football practice.
You know what's crazy, Tyler? I posted this on social media. I'm going to share this in my observation piece. There'll be like probably a bazillion observation stories today on Gamecock Central, but just like anything in life, everyone has a different perspective. So Wes will have his up. I'll have mine with the sights and sounds coming shortly. We have that for you. It was 85 degrees out when we were there.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I know that I'm from up north, but I've been in the South for 10 years. You know, I've been Mississippi here.
Sure.
85 degrees, and yet today, ninth season of covering the Gamecocks, by far the hottest in terms of humidity and what it felt like. I mean, we were there for just a couple minutes before we went in.
Right.
You know, we're outside the outdoor practice facility. We're just, behind a wall, essentially.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to pick on Wes, but I'll use Wes because he was just on. But Wes, Jack, I mean, veteran move. I wore black.
Of course.
But people just sweating through their T-shirts in a span of 2 minutes. So I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, this has to be, imagine being a guy like Dante Reno. Like some of these guys were here in the spring.
Sure.
This is night and day different for them. They're going out there dealing with it. The good thing is, this is exactly what you need, though, because week 3, LSU, noon game, I know the fans are hoping it'll be a little bit cooler. I understand.
Why not?
Get lubed up before the game, in the parking lot. Everything will be okay. But, man, it was steamy out there today.
And it's funny, they have the, exhibition soccer game at Willie B this upcoming weekend, and a lot of people from around the world flying in. I know Coach Ann was here the other day talking about welcoming in friends from Norway, and they got off the plane. They're like, oh, it's hot. He's like, well, this isn't hot. This is a mild summer afternoon. When that humidity kicks in like it did this morning, I walked out of my front door and felt it the second I stepped outside. I wouldn't want to have a helmet and shoulder pads on today. That's for sure.
They're going to go back across the pond. They're going to bring the ice cube, and it's going to change the world over there in England.
That's right. But plenty of things to get to today as we go through day one of camp, and obviously hear from everybody that talked yesterday out there immediately. As you've had a busy morning, not only being at camp, on with our guy Peter Burns on Sirius XM this morning. So I'm glad that you saved the main event for now. That was your warm-up for radio.
Yeah, they'll let any stiff on the SEC network radio these days. But no, I appreciate Peter and Chris. And I'll say this from talking to those two, especially Chris over the last couple weeks. Yes, the national perspective on South Carolina, and I'm sure even with amongst this fan base, there's probably a portion of it. They don't have high expectations, or they believe that they won't be a team to really make as much noise. And I'm not saying what I'm about to say is, okay, South Carolina is going to be in the college football playoff. But from talking to Doring, and I think he'd be okay with me saying this, he believes that this team could surprise some teams.
Sure.
And from talking to other people who cover the sport on a national level. So that's why I appreciate it. He's like, hey, man, we'd love to have you on, because I think there's a lot of people that are going to sleep on South Carolina. But based on the things that you've told us, based on the things that I've been able to gather from talking to people, this is, Doring here.
Yeah.
There could be a possibility of South Carolina surprising some teams because of that defense and because of what they were able to do from a reloading standpoint with their offensive line and their running back room.
Well, I think about this from a national perspective that, Carolina captured the attention of the college football world at the end of 2022 by pulling off those two big wins against Tennessee and Clemson back-to-back, and played that spirited bowl game against Notre Dame, which bowl games are, we take those with a grain of salt now because you lose so many guys to the portal and sitting out and all that kind of stuff. But still, a lot of people were talking about Carolina going into last season and wanting to see, okay, man, let's see what this Beamer guy's about. Overachieved in year one, overachieved in year two, and then they regressed back to 5-7 this past year. And I think with a lot of people who may not otherwise pay attention to South Carolina, that was kind of the write-off. It's like, hey, that 1 year was kind of neat. Got a couple of big wins there at the end, but they're back to just being South Carolina again, to where I don't think they're giving them much attention. It's going to take going out there and making another statement this year. Maybe that's beating Ole Miss. Maybe that's beating Alabama. Who knows what it may be, to kind of gather that attention again, I feel like.
And we've talked about it before in the past, Tyler, whether it be you and I've talked with Weston about this and on other platforms. I truly believe that the narrative with South Carolina, things change because of how quickly Beamer arrived in terms of having success in those first 2 seasons. Imagine what the narrative would be right now heading into year 4 if it was reversed, right? Mm-hmm. Beamer and this team, they do what they did last year in year 1, and they were able to have success, in years 2 and 3 instead. We'd be looking at this team completely different. Now, this isn't me trying to put your brain in some mental pretzel, but I think we're still trying to figure out what is the reality with this team, right? Like, what's the outlier? Right now, the outlier is last season. They've had success 2 out of 3, okay? The outlier right now is last season. It's not like they had, one good season in the last 3 years, and they had 2 bad years. So, again, not trying to do mental gymnastics here on a Friday, but I do think there is something to be said. Hey, we've seen this team get hot towards the end of the season the last couple of years. I mean, shoot, even last year, right?
Right.
I mean, the Clemson game, if they're able to find a way to punch it in the end zone for crying out loud and outside of the defensive touchdown they gave up, they're right in that game. I mean, they really are. So, look, I want to see what they can do. I understand schedule's tough, okay?
Right.
But there are pieces this year that have improved from last year, and there's a lot of question marks, just like any team. But I think that what they can do this year, I think it could surprise a lot of people and bring you into the future for, what could be a good 2025 year. I don't want to, let's enjoy this year first, right?
For sure. And there are a lot of unknowns, and that was the common theme. And what Beamer said, what Longin said, what White said when talking to the media yesterday, as well as some of the players, that we're not going to know a lot of things about this team until we actually start playing football in a little less than a month from now. We're going to try and learn as much as we can over the course of these next couple weeks of camp, but some questions are only going to be answered when you're actually playing real football games. But when you look at what they did in the offseason when it came to revamping tons of rooms, adding more depth to places like linebacker and defensive line, the upside potential for what this team is very, very high. And again, I'm not saying like you that, we're going to put them in the college football playoff or have a 10-win season or something like that, but getting yourself back on track that, 5-7 sucked a season ago, but it's not like it was this steep drop off from where you'd been the first couple seasons. It was a slight step back, but not insurmountable to take that step forward to at least get yourself back to a bowl game this year, where I feel like most people would say, you'd obviously love to win 9-10 games, but at least getting 6 wins and getting back to a 13th game would be a step back in the right direction to build off of 425-26 in years going forward.
And it's not like it's a consolation prize. At the end of the day, you are what your record says you are. But South Carolina, I mean, let's call a spade here, right? Last year is over, so we're not going to be able to change anything about it. It's not like this team was as bad as some people have them out to be, based on the things that happen with this team. The number of injuries on the offensive line. You want to call excuses, have at it. Call whatever you want, because, again, last year's last year. But if you want to just be rational here. Despite the adversity that they went through last year, they were still just one freaking game away from becoming bowl eligible. One game away. And honestly, not trying to bring back PTSD moments, they're one 4th down stop against Florida from being bowl eligible. And we could be sitting here today saying, you know what, South Carolina, man, they finished the year 7-6, went to a bowl game. The reality is that didn't happen. Right. But at the same time, too, let's not treat this team like they're, Vanderbilt, for crying out loud.
Sure.
All right? Like, there's some talent on this team. There's no question about it. And they've improved in a lot of different areas. You want to look at the schedule and just look at the schedule is tough. Every year, the schedule's tough. It's obviously getting tougher with Oklahoma. But my goodness, if anything, I would say this year's schedule, I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority. I'd say this year's schedule is a little bit easier in comparison to last year overall, because you had to play North Carolina week 1.
I was going to say, you dropped George from the schedule in the months of September like you've had to do the past 3 years. That certainly alleviates the pressure a little bit. But you're right. I mean, in looking at the losses they had last year, and yes, 7 of them, that is a lot and keeps you out of a bowl game. But, I mean, the North Carolina game, as bad as your offensive line was, it was still a tight game there at the end, only lost by 2 scores. You had the lead on Georgia at halftime in Athens in mid-September. You were in the Tennessee game until the pick 6 before halftime, and that one kind of got out of hand in the second half. Florida, as we mentioned, you get the 4th down there, you end up winning that game. Missouri, okay, that one kind of got away from you, but even so, your offense just was not able to get in the end zone. You were putting together drives, kicking field goals, and just not able to finish those things off. And even the Texas A&M game where you were down Xavier Legette for most of that game. You still managed to make it interesting, at least going into the fourth quarter. And then the Clemson game, again, if you don't give up that touchdown the first play of the game, who knows what happens there. So it's not like they were getting dominated in their 7 losses. They were there. They just needed to get a little bit better in certain areas to improve and pick up a few more wins.
With all the injuries and the lack of depth they had last year, I mean, think about where this team was heading into last season. We were talking about, man, this team's really young at a lot of spots. Man, they don't have a lot of proven depth. And unfortunately, guess what? When you have those two things combined, and then you have the injuries pile up the way that they did, especially early on in the season for this team, both offensively and defensively. Shoot, losing Mo Kaba in the first game of the year, and you saw how things played out in that linebacker room. God bless Debo Williams. I know Stone Blanton's not here anymore, and he had the bum ankle. But Stone should not have been out there for as many plays, but he had to because of the lack of proven talent. That was just the reality of it.
And Beamer mentioned this yesterday when talking about, schemes and the depth they have. Yes, last year at linebacker, once you did lose Mo Kaba, I mean, you really had a rotation of about 3 guys. Now you're looking at maybe twice that, 6, 7 guys if Mo Kaba can indeed, return back to form. I know you posted some pictures of him out there today, does have the knee brace on, but certainly looking like he's going to be able to give it a go this upcoming season. So you just have the depth, not only at linebacker, but so many spots to give you the belief that, again, as long as everybody can stay healthy, knocking on wood here, you should be better in so many areas.
And they need to. They need to, no question about it, because, look, the way that offenses operate now in college football with I call it hybrid more than anything, right? You look at some of these tight ends, I mean, they're created like out of a lab, for crying out loud. Like they're that hybrid, I mean, we see it obviously in the NFL with the Travis Kelce's of the world, even going back a couple years ago with Robert Gronkowski, and if you really want to go way back, but with the Mark Bavaros of the day. But with what's going on in college football now, you need to be able to have guys at that linebacker position, especially your outside linebackers, to be able to cover as well. And guess what? When they're covering, they're having to run around a little bit more. So there's a need more now than ever to be able to have guys in that room to have more talent, more depth, because if not, boy, we saw what happened last year. Your guys are going to get gassed early.
Today was the first day of putting on helmets and getting back onto the football field, but the entire summer was spent in the weight room. We'll hear what Coach Beamer had to say about everybody's physical transformations leading up into the start of fall camp coming up next. It is the halftime show. He's Mike Uva from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show, Tyler Head. Mike Uva from Gamecock Central hanging out with you on this Friday. First day of camp for Gamecock football. Yesterday, we heard from Coach Beamer as well as the assistants and a lot of players out there at their media availability at the indoor facility. Coach Beamer, as a part of his opening intro to his presser before taking some questions, was talking about, the physical transformations of his players and just how much bigger that they've gotten this offseason.
I just came from a team meeting upstairs, and Luke Day was talking to our players about the summer they had, and he's like, anybody that questions what you guys have done and the work you've put in, just all they have to do is look at you. And it's exactly right. When you see our players walk in here in a little bit, you're going to see them, and a lot of them look different and whatnot. I know some of those pictures that have been on social media have been quite a hit with some of the befores and afters, but we have that with every single one of our players, and took 4.5 hours yesterday as a coaching staff and went through every single player on our team and talked about their summers and whatnot. And our guys have definitely grown and gotten better, and it'll be very evident when you see them as well. Having said that, we still have a lot of work to do in the month of August as we head into the first game on August 31st, but there's no doubt we've grown and gotten better as a team since the spring game.
And again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the months of, the summer months, late spring months, that's time for Luke Day and his, staff to shine, to get these guys in better shape, get them bigger. We talked last week about the picture that Dylan Stewart, put out there of his transformation in just a few months on campus that people were going crazy about. But, that is what you look for when it comes to strength and conditioning, those kind of physical transformations. You take guys with good physiques and turn them into guys with great physiques.
And it starts with the players. You need to be bought into what you're being told to do, because you can have the greatest game plan in the world. I mean, think about it just from a football standpoint, X's and O's. If you don't believe in what the coaches are telling you to do, then it doesn't matter. You can have the greatest plan. I mean, you could go 12-0. So it starts with players being bought in, number one, to what they're doing in the offseason from a strength and conditioning standpoint. And number two, it also starts with having an incredible nutritional staff. I mean, talking to several players over the last couple weeks, they have been extremely impressed with what's going on from a nutritional standpoint. There were changes made to the nutritional staff about last season heading into last year, and the players really loved how things were. And it was a change last year for some of the guys, no question. But man, they have been extremely pleased. And shoot, I mean, if you have the ability to just hop on in there, and I know some of the guys, they teach the guys how to make their own meals too, right? Meal prep, but you have the ability to walk on in there and you're having some incredible food. I mean, it makes that process much easier too. Go out there, do what you got to do, be smart with what you're doing from a working out standpoint. But here's your chicken, here's the meat, whatever you need to do.
And our guy Preston on the morning show brought up a really good point in the wake of the Dylan Stewart photo last week. I mean, and he was in good shape, coming out of high school, and obviously that long frame, it looked like a good physique. But Preston brings up the point. He's like, how many kids in high school are eating three square meals a day? They're grabbing a Pop-Tart for breakfast, eating pizza at lunch, and maybe they eat what mom makes for dinner at home. They're not mixing in the right amount of protein. There's no regimen. They're just eating what they can and lifting weights, for an hour at school or whatever it may be. There's no regimen to it more often than not, unless you're going to an elite private school or something along those lines that may have the resources and means to do those kind of things. So for a lot of these guys, getting on campus, especially in January, this is the first time they've had structure when it comes to meals, when it comes to workout routines. And I know it seems crazy to think somebody can make that kind of transformation in just a few months, but that's what those kind of things can do.
And the crazy thing is, I was having this conversation with Wes and Jack Veltri before we walked into practice today with packing and getting ready for this move that I have coming up. I found, for whatever reason, I still have it. I still have my summer workout plan from Assumption. And that's D2. But it tells you, all right, you eat this many calories if you're trying to lose weight, eat this many calories if you're trying to, maintain, and eat this much if you're trying to gain. And it kind of just lays everything out there for you.
Right.
That's D2. Here, not only do they have that plan, and I'm sure every player has a packet that explains that, but they have the meals right in front of them too.
Sure. So
being able to, number one, understand, all right, here's what the game plan is, and we're literally handing it to you. All you have to do is just do it. It's as simple as just doing it. And I know that sounds like silly, but again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning with working out and understanding, okay, this is the plan. You got to actually buy into it. You got to buy into it. And I think those photos that we've seen on social media, that is proof of, hey, look, you do what the coaches are telling you, the strength and conditioning coaches are telling you, you do what we're trying to tell you from a nutritional standpoint. Look what can happen.
Right.
Look what can happen. And I was talking to another player. We haven't seen, every photo up there. We're not saying we need like an SI swimsuit down. No.
If you want that, you can make that on your own time.
Have it on your own time. But a lot of the guys, the biggest thing that they've noticed is just the amount of body fat they've dropped. Like they're like, I've gained weight, but I've gained muscle. I've gained mass, and like I can just see, I know it sounds silly, but the love handles, like your legs, like you're just able to.
Sure.
They're more tone, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, especially on like some
without
of those.
making this sound all weird here.
Exactly. Like especially on some of those linemen, maybe you're kind of trimming that last little bit of baby fat that was holding on and turning that into muscle. And the transformation you see of guys, again, in just a couple of months, but especially from when they come in as freshmen to when they leave as seniors.
No question.
It is night and day. They go from kids to grown men overnight in just a few short years.
And if you talk to any strength and conditioning coach, especially the players that make the jump from high school to college, the first thing that they'll tell you that they can gain mass on is in their legs. So if you've seen some of those photos, I mean, Dylan Stewart, he goes from, I'm not saying that he wasn't a big guy to begin with,
right?
But he looks like one of those WWE action figures, for crying out loud, right, like, how big his quads are now.
Absolutely. With strength and conditioning as well, and Beamer touched on this yesterday too, because people are always going to ask the question when you have a season like last year where injuries decimated you, particularly at one position like offensive line, what are you doing in the offseason to improve those things to make the injuries less? Now, there are some instances like getting rolled up on. You can't prevent that. That's going to happen. That's part of football. You get tackled the wrong way, you fall the wrong way, but you still have to go out there and be proactive and try and do something different. And he elaborated on that yesterday. I think it was one of the questions that you asked him, like, hey, we're doing things differently before we go through our walkthroughs and things like that, stretching these guys out a little bit different ways and that might not be the end-all be-all to prevent every injury, which you can never actually do, but you're doing something to try and alleviate what you dealt with the season ago.
Yeah, I'm glad he brought that up. It was funny because look, I like a good conspiracy theory.
Sure.
I've gone down the rabbit hole myself when it comes to whether or not Tupac's still alive. Like, I like a good conspiracy theory once in a while.
Of course. The
conspiracy theories out there as to why South Carolina scheduled their practices to begin at 9:23 or whatever, right? 9:18, 9:38. It took on a life of its own. I was telling Wes this. There are people that truly believe that there was something to be said about Bible verses. And the reason I'm like, I know we're in the South, but I don't think that's the reason. Anytime a coach does something, there is a reason behind it. So I'm glad when I asked that question, it could have been like, yeah, that's just how it happened. I'm glad he gave us, the what's going on in the kitchen, right?
Sure.
Pull the curtain aside and say, yeah, we're going to go out there. We're going to have an activation period. And I think one thing too, Tyler, and I know it's not going to satisfy every fan. I'm glad he brought it up. He's like, we've gone back to last spring and we've broken down every injury, whether it be major, whether it be minor, and we've tried to figure out, okay, why are these things happening? And there's some things, activation period, he mentioned that the majority of the time for a practice, your players are sitting in a meeting for about 30, 45 minutes to up to an hour.
Right.
They go out there and they're not really running around as much before they stretch. So that's what this activation period is supposed to do. But he also brought up, he's like, based on the average number of injuries that we had last year and the last couple of years, it was that average. And it's the average across the country, too. The problem is it happened all to the same injury. It happened to the same positional group.
Yep.
So those injuries really stood out more. And I think that's the frustrating part for the fan base.
Absolutely. And again, knock on wood, you don't deal with the amount of bad luck you dealt with like a position group the offensive line had a year ago with those injuries. And look, injuries are going to happen. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to miss games. That's just part of football. It's a contact sport. Those kind of things happen. You just hope it's more spread out than it certainly was a season ago. I want to get back into some stuff that Beamer said yesterday as well, particularly regarding Nick Harbor, because he is going to be a focal point not only here locally in South Carolina, but across the country as his fame begins to rise with the latest college football video game and his rating within that. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Halftime Show. He's Mike Uva. I'm Tyler Head on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva with you here on your Friday. Reminder, the greatest moments in Gamecock sports history since 2000. Up and running on our Twitter poll at 1075 Game. We actually have a consolation poll up today for ones that did not win earlier this week. And we're going to take the 4 finalists coming up next week, have our final poll, and announce the winner on August 12th and talk about them on that day, all sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. As we head into this season, it'll be year number 2 for Nick Harbor, who, of course, came in last year as a true freshman 5-star with a lot of hype from people behind him based on that star ranking, and his freak athleticism was named to Bruce Feldman's freak list last year as well. Coach Beamer talked a little bit about him yesterday and how he's potentially going to live up to the hype that people are placing on his shoulders going into year number 2.
Nick Harbor needs to continue to work like he's been working. I think the fact that he's putting forth the effort. Even when he was busy with track in the spring, he was at football meetings every morning when he was in town. He was on the practice field with us when it didn't interfere with track. Not practicing, but at least out here with us. And then the fact that he was out in Oregon for all of their stuff, and then immediately afterwards said he was not going to pursue the Olympic thing this year, and he was ready to start focusing on football, I think says a lot about, what he's about. And then the thing for him is Nick's just got to continue to work. I mean, you think about it, Mike Furry's been our receivers coach, and he's never actually worked with Nick on the practice field yet. So tomorrow will be the first time that Mike and Nick have ever worked together because Nick didn't really go through spring practice. Now, they've been meeting a lot and things like that and doing some summer workouts that we're allowed to do within the rules. But as far as actual practice, tomorrow will be Nick's first practice with Mike. And so we've got to get him better and a lot of our receivers better. But I think the thing for him, he's big. And he can run really, really fast, but there's so much more to playing a receiver than just that. Releases, catching the ball, understanding how to beat coverage and techniques and things like that. And he's worked at all that since he got here last year and has really worked hard this summer as well. I think the thing with him is just let's let Nick just continue to develop. And there's a lot of my message to him, look, there's a lot of expectations on you. You got this 99 rating in this video game, and we had recruits here last week, and they're all like, man, 99, Nick Harbor, and they know, and he's known nationally because of that. And the Bruce Feldman did his freaks thing last year, and he was the #1 freak in college football and all that as well. All that's great, but, Nick just wants to be a young man, work really, really hard, and try and be the best football player that he can be, and we're here to support him and help him accomplish all of that as best we can.
And I thought what he said in there was really important to give some people some perspective. Today's the first day he's gotten to work with Mike Fury on the field. Like, yeah, he was around in the spring and meetings and stuff like that, but not in shoulder pads, not in a helmet. He was just there, to gain as much knowledge as he could while still focusing on track. And he only stopped track stuff about a month ago. So there is going to be a process of getting back acclimated to football, getting back in football shape, all that kind of stuff. And he said, well, we have a clip from him from earlier where he's talking about, man, I'm out there on the jugs machine. I'm in the facility until 11 o'clock at night. He's doing all the right things, but he's not going to come out of the gate red hot like I think a lot of people are expecting him to be. It's going to be something that I think is going to progress as the season goes along.
And I keep saying this. Nick Harbor was a 5-star athlete coming out of high school. 5-star athlete. He was a defensive end, and he was a tight end. This will be just his second season of playing wide receiver. Having said that, Tyler, and I know you probably heard it too from people in the offseason, well, he should be focusing more on football. Well, guess what? That was the
agreement we made.
This was the deal. And I can tell you from talking to coaches in the spring, they were saying he's done exactly what we could have hoped for and then some, because he was coming to practices and taking mental reps. He was going to meetings when he could, and he was working out about 2 times a week with Lenore Sellers and the other quarterbacks. If he was just focused on track and field, he would not have been in the building since, November, December, the last team meeting, whatever the case may have been.
Sure.
He was still actively around football. Now, is there something to be said about being able to go out there and be in pads? Of course. But let's not act like he's the first player that's ever done this, and let's not act too, right? there's other players that did not practice in the spring for one reason or another. Some of those guys had injuries. Some of those guys had injuries lower body, and they couldn't really do anything from a conditioning standpoint, strengthening their legs. Guess what? What was Nick doing? Nick was running. He was getting faster.
Right.
He's getting, he's training. So, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's understand, too, that this is a guy that's still learning a new position. But at the same time, too, man, if he's able to make the impact that they believe he can, and it might be a little different than what the fan base believes,
sure,
and hope that he can do, he can really be able to take his game to that next level and be able to put himself in a position where it's like, hey, man, Nick Harbor, wow, what a jump from freshman year to sophomore year, especially with the talented wide receiver coach like Mike Furrey.
Yeah, and I think it's also important. This could play into his advantage as well. This is a wide open wide receiver room, as Beamer mentioned
question
yesterday. I can't sit here and tell you who our top 6 guys are going to be right now. That's going to be determined over the next couple of weeks here in fall camp, and may continue to evolve as the season goes along. And, not to mention that Mike Furrey was not your wide receivers coach a season ago. So you have a new coach. You have a bunch of guys in from the portal. You have the Harbors and the Tyshawn Russells that were here on the staff or on the team a season ago. But everybody kind of comes in with a clean slate. So if Nick Harbor is that guy, he'll show to be that guy here in the next couple weeks. And again, I don't know if he's going to come out as the best receiver right out of the jump. It may take some time to kind of get reacclimated to things, but by season's end, he could certainly be that guy. But until then, there's going to be a lot of shuffling. There's going to be a lot of figuring out, okay, use this guy here, use that guy here. Do we want this guy in this situation, this guy in that situation? Schemes. There's a whole lot of learning that everybody's going to be doing, not only in camp, but at the start of the season as well.
You mentioned scheme, so it's not as simple as answering this question saying, all right, yeah, he'll be the number 1, he'll be the number 2. But if I had to ask you, Tyler, and for those who are listening, what are your realistic expectations for Harbor? I think that's the best way to put it. What are your realistic expectations? I know the video game says he's 99 in speed. Well, guess what? Yeah, we all know he's fast, okay? But realistically, the human being that is on the field, what are your realistic expectations as he heads into his sophomore year?
I think he can be a top 2 receiver on this team. I'm not going to sit here and say he has to be the number 1 guy, because I don't know, Larvadain could end up being the number 1 guy, and with his skill set and experience, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But I do think, based on what we saw out of him last year, because, again, he was playing a new position, took him a little while to kind of get acclimated to it. By the second half of the season, he was averaging 48 snaps a game. Mm-hmm. When Xavier Legette was injured against A&M, he led the team in receptions and total yards with 59 and scored a couple touchdowns last year as well. We saw the bits and pieces of what he's capable of doing. What does that mean going into a second year, and how much better can he get? I think he'll improve quite a bit. And again, the fact that he's not in the shadow of an Xavier Legette who's taking the bulk of the catches, I think that's going to help him out a lot. So I'm not going to place the pressure of saying, oh, he's got to be the number 1 guy, but I do think he can be one of the better receivers on this team.
And if we saw anything with this offense last year, obviously injuries played a role. Juice Wells not being in the lineup really at all last season. But typically you think, okay, the number 3 guy is your slot guy. In this offense, from a number standpoint, it really doesn't matter, because as we saw with Xavier Legette last year, he was the number 1. He was the clear number 1, and they plugged him in practically everywhere. He was out on the perimeter. He was in the slot. So to me, I'm looking at Harbor being either a 2 or a 3 receiver in this offense. I think 3 is more where I'm leaning towards, at least to start the season. But that is wishful thinking that the other guys in that room are going to step up. I mean, that's the tough thing. There's so many new faces. We've mentioned this stat before. 50% of the scholarship players in that wide receiver room are new this year. So there's a lot of unknowns. And when you're replacing a guy like Xavier Legette, my goodness. That's why a guy like Mazio Bennett, to go along with the other transfers, you could throw DeBron Gatlin in there as well. There's opportunity in that room. And you have a new wide receiver coach. Right. So you're starting with a blank slate. Man, a lot of unknowns, but it's going to be fun to watch that room from a competition standpoint.
What, like the 3rd or 4th wide receiver coach in this calendar year alone?
Yeah, right.
That was a fun spin of the roulette wheel earlier this year.
Oh, goodness.
But I think we landed on the good one. Mike Furrey, everybody seems to like him. Obviously has the experience, played in the NFL, which is, going to appeal to a lot of guys that are trying to get the league themselves. So excited to see how that room ends up working out. We'll continue this conversation, hit our Firehouse Subs text of the hour coming up next. Also, hear a little bit of what Dow Loggins had to say about EA Sports College Football 25. It's coming up next. Halftime show. He's Mike Yuva. I'm Tyler Head on your Friday on the Game.
Sign-ups start the week of July 29th. Call Charwood at
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva along with you on your Friday here on the game. It is time for our Firehouse Subs text of the hour, 803-404-6100. Nameless texter weighs in and says, guy from Nevada is the best receiver on the team. That's in reference to Delvon Campbell transferring over this offseason. The funny thing about Delvon Campbell, he was a good receiver on a terrible offense out there in Nevada. So in a way, I feel like we don't truly know the full scope of how good he can be without having solid pieces around him. That being said, he was like roughly half of their offensive production, particularly when it came to receiving touchdowns at Nevada a season ago. So I'm intrigued to see how he fits into this South Carolina offense in the SEC.
And it goes back to some of the things we were talking about before. It's wishful thinking, right? And I'm not trying to be negative Nancy. I'm not trying to be the wet blanket in the room. But in a perfect world, yeah, every player you bring in is going to be able to make an impact, especially a guy that is, you know, he's a veteran guy. You expect to be able to come in here and make the type of presence that you need in a room like the wide receiver room this season. So, look, if he's able to go out there, obviously that helps USC, but you know who that helps out a lot? It helps out a guy like Nick Harbor. It takes some of that pressure off. I know a lot of people have been talking about the lack of height in the wide receiver room. I think there's a lot of speed in that room, and I don't think you necessarily need so much height where you're going to be like, oh, man, like, you know, we're going to be screwed. No, I think they can be okay with it. But again, with Harbor and his height, naturally people are going to be looking like, man, it would be great if we can have Harbor get going. Well, guess what? God forbid.
Yeah.
God forbid Nick just needs a couple weeks to get going. Having a guy like Campbell can be huge, but certainly one of those guys need to step up.
And the hope would be that as the season goes along, if Campbell is your starter at, you know, that one spot, that X position where you do want somebody a little bit taller, that Harbor, as time goes along, does eventually pass him and does take that spot to where, not that Delvon Campbell wouldn't be used, but would be used in a different way as the season goes along, making way for Harbor, you know, not only for this year, but for years to come, certainly as well. I want to get this clip from Dow Loggins because we're talking about the video game, talking about Harbor's you know, high rating and all that. And I thought Dow Loggins had a perfect answer. He's not a video game guy, which I wouldn't expect him to be. He's too busy watching film and scheming up offenses. But he had a very interesting answer when posed the question of guys that don't like their ratings on the new College Football 25 game.
If you don't like your rating, play better. Get more play time. Make play on Saturday. I don't know much about the game. I mean, obviously, I don't live in a cave. I've heard stuff, but it's like bugs driving me nuts. But like, if you're not happy with something, and like work, go ahead and do your job. And you know, I don't know how they get the ratings. I don't know who comes about that. I was not consulted on any ratings. More importantly, so I can tell these guys like, hey, I don't know. I don't play. Like, I'm not sure on that. So just play well.
I love that answer because we've seen so many guys since this game has come out like, hey, at EA Sports, I'm 53 overall. What's the deal? Blah, 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 blah. And look, there's thousands of athletes in this game. They're not going to be able to get everybody's ratings especially right. So you know what I mean? But like, he brings up a good point. If you want your rating to get better, and I'm sure they're going to be able to adjust it as the season goes along, go out there and prove it. Go out there and have an amazing game. Go out there, put together 2 to 3 good games. Make them take notice of you where they're going to have to move that rating up. That's all you can do. You know what I mean? And
there's some guys, too, who will get a nice kick out of it. Hunter Rogers, and I wish I had the post in front of me. I think it was on like an Instagram story post from a couple days ago, maybe a week ago. They have him listed as a tight end.
Yes, because there's no long snapping position in the game.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be something. You could do Road to Glory as a long snapper.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So
a holder.
So Hunter said, you know, they listed him as a tight end. His rating wasn't great, but they gave him a very high score for catching because, as we remember,
Gator Bowl.
Scored that touchdown in the Gator Bowl.
So they're paying attention. They're doing their research. And I don't know if it's like a specific person assigned to every team, I would think, or maybe like a one person assigned to a small group of teams, because that's so many athletes and so many of these guys that maybe only played in a handful of games or a handful of snaps last year or in years prior that you have to kind of gauge to figure out how good they are. That's not an easy task. Like it's a full-time job for the people doing it at Madden, and they adjust those ratings as the season goes along as well. And I can imagine it's even 10 times more challenging doing it in college too.
I was going to say maybe you just assign someone to like a conference, but some of these conferences are massive now.
That's still over 1,000 players per conference.
Well, their job is only going to get more intense now that the talks of expanding teams up to potentially 120. I mean, and again, does that mean every team's going to do that? No, but just a little extra work.
We haven't been in here to talk about the game much. You in it? How deep have you gotten into it so far?
And it's funny you ask me because Peter Burns asked me that same question. I don't have it.
You don't have it yet? Okay.
See, with everything going on, I'm like, I have to get a PlayStation 5. That's the problem.
Well,
the last one I had was a PS3.
I had to bite the bullet on that too.
So that's where it begins. And I get it. It's like, you're not going to be able to make this game for PlayStation 3 because of, data, gigabytes, all that stuff that I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But obviously you need some more storage to be able to make the graphics look probably the way that they do. And
sure.
And all the different features. But at some point, and what's going to stink is this, I'm going to probably be god-awful. Like, I played NCAA every year when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Every year. I was big with that. And, in college, we would take the PlayStations on the road. I mean, if we had a road game night before, after team meetings, we'd play some NCAA. If we couldn't go out because we had a game the next day, we'd be playing NCAA tournaments with all the guys. So, yeah, I mean, I was really big with it back in the day. I'm excited that it's back, but I am disappointed. It feels like that meme, Tyler. You have like Squidward just watching SpongeBob and Patrick run outside. Like, I feel like I'm missing out so much.
I understand, and I will tell you this: whenever you get your hands on it, it's way different. It took me about a week to get comfortable enough with the differences in the game compared to what 14 was to feel good about playing it now.
We mentioned NCAA. What did you think about Beamer's comment yesterday, saying that he feels like he's failed as a father because his son Hunter was offered the starting quarterback position in Mississippi State, goes there, then he's academically ineligible, and now he said he's entering the transfer portal again in the video game.
We're going to get to that. Don't worry. I have that teed up ready for later on in the show. That'll come up a little bit later on. 1 hour in the books, 2 more hours to go. It is the halftime show. He's Mike Yuba. I'm Tyler Head on your Friday on the Game. 1 o'clock, welcome back in. It's hour number 2 of the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva along with you here on your Friday on the Game, making our way through what the coaches had to say yesterday at Media Day prior to camp kicking off earlier on today, as we are about 29 days away from kickoff between South Carolina and Old Dominion in week number 1 at Williams-Brice Stadium. I want to jump over to the defense now. Clayton White talking to a couple media members yesterday about a number of things. I'll start off with this. Just what excites him most about this defense this year?
What excites me the most is the experience and obviously the veterans that we have. As far as group, I like the edge group. I love watching them. To me, an edge, if you have a good edge group, you have a chance because you can set edges on runs. You can get pressure on the quarterback. They get sacks, call fumbles, and tip balls. That's the group that I'm the most excited about.
And it's one thing to just add depth to position groups like linebacker, like edge, like defensive line, but to add depth with the amount of experience that you have with this team now only makes it that much better. As Beamer mentioned yesterday, you're looking at 6 or 7 guys deep at the linebacker spot. So many of these guys just have played a lot of college football between here. You got guys like Bengali Kamara, Demetrius Knight coming in from various places, in addition to the freshmen coming in as well that you think might have an opportunity to rotate in there too. Not to mention the guys you bring on the defensive line, the edge spot. Gilbert Edmond comes back, Kyle Kennard. You just have so much experience up front. And I'm not saying this has to be a top 5 defense in the SEC, but all indications that this should be better than what you had a season ago.
Yeah, talking to one player the other day, their exact quote was that this defense is scary. It is scary. Now, we talk a lot about the depth. I know we're talking about linebacker right now, but there's a lot of depth on that defensive line as well. It's not just the depth that should excite you about this team defensively. What it should also excite you about is the fact that there's just so much more competition. Mm-hmm. I always talk about at this time of the year, the last thing you want are your players to feel comfortable, right? You want your players to feel like, man, I have to make sure that I'm performing, because if not, someone else is coming in and going to take my job. Now, we can look at some positions on both sides of the football and say, all right, for example, talk about linebacker. Is Debo Williams going to be a starter week 1? Yeah, right? Knock on wood, but he'll be the starter week 1. But for some of those other guys, because of the competition, because of the players that they were able to acquire via the transfer portal, and some of the young talent. I mean, I know we're talking defense, but interviewing Vershawn Lee yesterday, and he was talking about from the competition from the offensive line room, he's like, because of the talent that they were able to bring in the freshman class, he's like, we're looking over saying, man, we got some dogs behind us too. So that competition is being felt, but especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, and speaking specifically about freshmen really quick, and Wes mentioned this a little bit earlier, there's indications that J.R. Johnson might be the backup at the Sam spot right now at linebacker. He is performing that well. And look, there's always going to be freshmen that through camp or through spring catch a lot of people's attention that may not end up panning out once we get into the season. But up to this point, and he's a guy that was kind of a late bloomer, when he got the offer from South Carolina at a camp, sometime last year before committing to them, that he's coming along really strongly. And again, you're not having to throw him out there as a starter because you have so much depth, but if he can work his way onto the field, he'll have earned it.
And you can do it if you can be able to get young guys out there just to even get their feet wet just a little bit, right? There's a difference between, okay, we got a player on the field because we have to, because of injuries. Think of last year with the offensive line, Luatosin Babalade, big tree, and then you also had Trevon Baugh. Now, they held their own. In a perfect world, is that what you want to see in the SEC? Certainly not.
No.
But at the same time, too, if you're able to just get their feet wet just a little bit, now they can be like, all right, I understand what the speed looks like more than anything, and I understand what to expect now. And when their number does get called, whether it be later in the year as a freshman or, sophomore if they have to step up more, they're more prepared for it. I mean, that's what should excite you about some of these positions because of what happened last year. Kind of that glass half empty, now half full look.
I feel like you try and flex on us by saying his full name every single time.
I love saying it. I love saying Oluwatosin Babalade because I remember trying to learn how to say it. And
put in all the work, and you're may as well use it now.
There's some names. I mean, when I was still at Watch Fox, I know Gamecock fans aren't going to like this, but I remember, learning how to say, DJ Uiagalelei or when Clemson played Alabama in the national championship, trying to say, Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's the only one that I wasn't able to ever say was that Clemson backup quarterback who ended up transferring out.
Yeah,
with like a P.
I know who you're talking about. I couldn't
say
I couldn't
that.
do that one either.
But fortunately, at that point, I think he had either transferred out or I'd moved over to Gamecock Central. I'm like, I'm not going to have to worry about saying his name.
I was going to say some of those names a little bit too extreme that some of us average people can't learn too easily there. But getting back to the main point, we talk about this experience, particularly on defense. We'll continue on the trend with Clayton White here. That experience can also give you the opportunity to play more defensive schemes, like we saw last year, where the 3-3-5 became a core part of what they were doing in the month of November and helped tremendously. Now, yes, the competition level was Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Clemson. Not the Alabamas and Georgias of the world necessarily, but still, improvement is improvement no matter who you're playing against. And he talked about that as well, that having that experience can allow them to play things a little bit differently because these guys know what's up.
It's obviously been a process getting that done. I mean, it takes a while. It took us the time to kind of understand and really believe it and put it out in the game and in games and do it and be successful. It starts with just our guys understanding our base 4-down defense. Once they understand, which our guys do, we made it to where those terms just go right to the 3-down defense. So, and it does help to have a veteran defense where I don't have to teach the 4-down defense and say, hey guys, I know you just learned that, but now that's going to be also the 3-down defense. But now our veteran knows the 4-down, so we just really teach them 3-down principles, and we'll start out in the 4-2-5, 4-2 nickel tomorrow, and then we'll transition over to our 3-down stuff from day 3 and 4.
That is such an underrated aspect of something like this, where you don't have to take the extra time to teach and explain the concept and what you're doing, what your role in it is going to be. You're just saying, hey, this is what we're doing. Everybody go out there and do their jobs. And yeah, sure, the freshmen, J.R. Johnson, guys like that are going to have a little bit of an up-to-speed process, but having those veterans there is going to only help them get to learn it a little bit faster.
Not just from a defensive standpoint, but from talking to a couple of the players, I said, how beneficial was it in the spring? And I know it goes without saying, but their reaction was like, my goodness. Like, it's like going from, I was going to say, like Calc 1 to Calc 2. I mean, I was awful at math. I was taking a freshman algebra class my senior year. So, I mean, I'm probably not
I'm right there with
the math whiz guy to be talking here and using that analogy. But, the point being is they feel like they are so much further along. And they should be, right? You had an opportunity to have 14 practices plus that 15th one being the spring game. So you have an idea of what things are going to look like schematically, and just like the little things too, like where to stand during like stretch period. I know that sounds dumb, but just the little things. And when you're not thinking, guess what? You're able to go out there and you're able to play a hell of a lot faster. So certainly being able to get a lot of those players in here, right? Yeah, the transfer guys came in, but a lot of those freshmen, the majority of the freshmen were here in the spring. God forbid you need one of those players to step in right away, or in the case of someone like Dylan Stewart, who could see some playing time early in one way or another, being able to have him on campus, he's able to understand, all right, this is the SEC, this is the speed, this is what I'm being asked to do.
Right.
As opposed to, okay, when I was in high school, maybe they just said, all right, just get by, that guy. Get by the left tackle, get by the right tackle.
I was going to say, go after the guy with the ball. And for somebody with his freak athleticism, that was probably enough. And he went out there and just mauled people. There's a little different story now.
I was going to say, maybe after year one, they might be able to do, like Clowney was kind of, hey, just go get the guy with the ball. Got it, coach.
And going back to spring practice, where a lot of people, it's a classic thing of saying, well, the defense is usually going to be ahead of the offense. That's how it typically goes. But for anybody that was concerned, like, oh my God, the offensive line looks terrible, they're getting so much penetration. Well, for one, they hadn't settled on a starting 5, and they had their offensive line split between 2 teams. But just that experience up front on defense in the first 2 levels, quite frankly, including linebacker in this as well, that probably indicated to you that the defense was going to be that much farther ahead of the offense, just because those guys had played so much football, and you're not having to worry about the cohesion as much with some of those groups as you are with an offensive line that, again, was split up between 2 teams.
Yeah, and I think being able to just get some of those guys, those reps last season, it's beneficial, right? But at the same time, too, and I'll say Luatosin Babalade one more time, and Travon Baugh, I'm not trying to write both of them off or either, or one of them. But because of some of the additions they were able to add this offseason, man, nothing's guaranteed that both those guys will start. I mean, that's the conversation that I continue to have with people inside that building. They're like, those guys are looking good, but man, there's some really good competition going on. Like, nothing is is a lock here. And obviously, when you're thinking about the offensive line, certainly it's not just about having one good guy, it's about having a good unit.
So I think Steven Garcia was attempting to call us there. Did not get to the phone before I was able to, before he hung up there.
He just texted me saying
if you
want to
call in, give us another call as we hit this break here. We'll get you on in the next segment. Interested to hear what he has to say. We'll hear from him coming up next. It is the Halftime Show here on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva from Gamecock Central hanging out with you on your Friday afternoon. As I said just before the break there, we do indeed have the one and only Steven Garcia joining us on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Steven, appreciate you taking a little bit of time. What's on your mind today?
I can't believe it's Friday. That's holy mackerel, where'd this week go, man? Yeah, I'll tell you what, me and Pat and our little podcast team, man, we just left practice and, got done interviewing some guys, and I completely forgot how hot South Carolina is. It is absolutely freaking scorching out here.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I mentioned today that, in my 9 years of covering this team, for a first practice, I was only 85 when we went out there, but the humidity and just being able to go out there, my goodness, like you imagine some of these guys, like the Dante Renos who grew up in the Northeast region, and just some of these guys transferring in, maybe they played like at Pittsburgh, right? I mean, they're probably like, what the hell is this?
I mean, I got a chance to talk with Reno after practice. He was walking through the little area, and I was like, how you feeling, man? How you liking the seat? And he's just like shaking his head. He's like, this is not at all like Massachusetts. I think that's why your boy Uva's leaving, man. He's tired of the seat. He's hauling ass, huh?
I've not gotten the official confirmation on that, but I believe it's going to be a little bit cooler up there in Rhode Island than it is in South Carolina this time of year. Is that correct?
If I don't get the girlfriend a jacket, her exact words were, she'll enter the transfer portal. So stay tuned.
Steven, what was the hottest first day of camp for y'all?
Oh man, they all just kind of ran together, and it's crazy. I was talking with me and Pat were doing the tailgate talk deal, and we had Luke Doty on, and I asked him. I said, "Look, man, like I'm just curious. I think the people should hear this. What is your day like? When do you wake up and when you go to sleep? What is a camp day in the life for you?" And the amount of stuff he's like, "Yeah, I wake up at around like 5:30, get to the facility around like 6:15, 6:20, and he doesn't leave until like 8 o'clock at night." And I'm sitting there looking at Pat, and I'm like, dude, we literally had practice and watched a little bit of film, and then Coach Ferrer's like, all right, you guys have a good rest of your day. And we sure as shit did. We had a friggin' ball. But it's to answer your question, man, I mean, they were all hot, extremely hot. And, you feel like you could get used to it. And, everybody's like, oh, you're from Tampa. You should be okay with the seat. I'm like, man, at least we had a breeze in Tampa. It's just stiff air here. It just runs together, man. It's wild.
So you know how it goes. First day of camp, just more so the excitement, because people just care about football, especially in this area. From what you saw, any takeaways? Again, I know helmet, shorts. I was out there. The media had a chance to observe the first 3 practices, so we got to see how Johnny and Jimmy were able to stretch, because that's one period. It was, fascinating. But anything that stood out to you though, Steven?
You know what? To be honest, just how big the team is. I don't remember having as big of, like, literally physically as big as these guys are now. I mean, the tight ends. Coach Elliott introduced me to all of them yesterday at the indoor. Then, got a chance to hang out with them today, and it's just how massive these kids are. It's unbelievable. But to be honest, man, we didn't really watch a whole lot of practice. We were kind of doing the podcast deal and all that other stuff. But I mean, I looked over, I glanced at a few plays, and I saw Sellers throw a couple balls. Man, I mean, it's going to be an interesting year. I feel like I think there's a lot of unproven stuff, but I think that's when Coach Beamer and I feel like these guys are the best when kind of people are they're kind of the underdog, and I think they're going to shock the hell out of some people. And Coach Beamer's got these guys fired up, man. They love playing for him. That is 100% something that I've noticed, man. These guys are all in. They are bought in. With Coach Beamer and his staff, and it's pretty cool to see.
Again, talking to former Gamecock quarterback Steven Garcia, and Sellers, this is his second season on campus, came in as the backup last year, now is the guy going into this camp. Well, I guess will officially be the guy when Beamer names him the starter, but we all know what the situation is. What is it like going into fall camp knowing that you are the starting quarterback of a team in the SEC? What kind of pressure is that like?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little pressure, but that's what you signed up for. If pressure is going to get the best of you, then you're in the wrong damn sport. You're playing the wrong position. It's that simple. Everybody's kind of looking at you to lead the way. And, fortunately for me, I had guys like, Pat. I had guys like Travian Robertson, Stephon, Melvin, some guys that, kind of held everybody accountable. So, it was a grind, man, absolute grind, and that's what I said, man. It's what you sign up for. So you gotta eat, sleep, and love it, and it's going to be interesting, man. I'm excited to see what he does. As his, first year as a starting guy, and it is a lot of pressure, but like I said, that's what he signed up for.
We were talking about it yesterday, Stephen, and I don't want to get you in trouble and not to announce anything, but I have to at least ask, because some people are going to be like, they keep mentioning this new podcast. You and DeMarco are doing something. I know there's going to be more information that will come out in the next couple days, hopefully, but you have, and again, I know you don't want to announce the guest, but you had a pretty good guest yesterday, and you said you had some players today. So what can we kind of expect with this new podcast that you guys are going to be doing?
We're going to be covering, obviously, the Carolina football team. That's kind of our main priority. After that, obviously Pat played 10 years in the league, so he's got a bunch of NFL connections. So we're going to, once the college football season ends, go straight into the NFL, and after the NFL, go into basketball, and then from basketball to baseball. So it'll kind of be a year-round, just kind of a sports deal. During some of the downtime, I'll probably have a couple guys like yourself and some business owners.
Come on, you can do better than that. You played with Alshon and Marcus, and you're going to get my scrubness on. I mean, we want ratings here, baby. Come on.
Trust me, we're definitely going to have those guys on there. There's no question about that. But I'm saying, as far as during the off season and kind of the lull times of the sports world, have some of the sponsors that are sponsoring our show, and get guys that just have different perspectives.
Bring the stiffs in. I got you.
Former athletes.
Got you.
Right.
That's D2 All-American Mike Uva, by the way.
I wish I was All-American. We could say that, though. They started winning as soon as I stopped playing over there.
It looks good on a resume, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Scalabrine, right? When he played in the NBA, he had a post-game interview after the finals. He's like, I didn't play at all, really, but he's like, 5 years from now, I'm going to say that I played a couple minutes, scored a couple baskets. 10 years from now, say I averaged a double-double, and then maybe 20, 30 years from now, I'll say I was the finals MVP, and no one will question it.
Exactly. There's this thing called Google, though, that kind of deterred everybody from lying. And
yeah,
I don't know if D2 records are as easy to track as some D1 ones, so you might be able to fly under the radar on that one.
Well, Paulie Uva, my dad, Paulie Uva, back in the day. I hope they're not listening. Get them. My mother just smack them after I say this. I mean, back in the day when him and my uncle would go out to bars, they would just tell girls that they were AAA guys for the Red Sox. And back then they couldn't check it, and they're like, "Wow,
right.
Yeah, what position pitcher? Wow, what you doing later?"
Yeah.
A little different, though.
I could imagine that worked. Yeah. Just a wee bit.
Stephen, before we let you go, I have to ask, anytime we get a former player of Spurrier's on here, any good Spurrier stories from camp or from the season that are notable or worthy enough to share on the radio, that are clean enough for the radio?
I don't know if there's anything clean enough. I can try to clean it up a little bit. It's going to be extremely difficult. That's more of an off-record deal. But I mean, he was extremely anal and very, very wound up, especially in the beginning of the camp. Just everybody's high energy. It's hotter than hell out here. So that makes everybody a little bit crazy in general. But I'm trying to think of a clean story here. I've probably told this story a couple of different times, but I think the main one was probably my first ever camp in 2007. I come out there, I'm walking with, Tommy Beecher, Smelly, and Blake Mitchell. And we're coming up there. I'm like, who is this guy in a pink bandana with his shirt off, doing yoga on the practice field? Because, we had to walk from the stadium to the proving grounds. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I look at Blake, and he just looks at me and goes, just wait a second. So I get over there, and sure as shit, it's Coach Spurrier over there. And I was like, what's up, Coach? How's everything going? He's like, man, just get you some Rays, young Garcia. And I was like, okay, man. I guess I'm going to warm up here now. Are you gonna put your shirt on, or what are we doing here? Are we going shirtless today? So that's probably the best PG story I can give. Other than that, he was MFing me the entire time.
You've been pretty PG on this interview too, so we appreciate that, Stephen. Got some breaking news.
I've only cussed a few times.
Yeah, only two. We only had to drop 2 words. A little breaking news though for us. South Carolina has picked up a commitment from 4-star safety Kendall Daniels Jr.
There we go.
Out of Virginia, Norfolk, to be exact. So Gamecock fans that have been looking for some 4 stars, there you go. 4-star safety
Nice.
on the way.
Boom. Steven Garcia on the phone lines is good luck.
There he
Officially
is.
Confirmed. All right, Steven,
awesome.
we appreciate you taking a few minutes, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'll see you in about 2 hours.
All right, sounds good.
Absolutely. Former Gamecock quarterback Steven Garcia. We'll continue on with the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Huber from Gamecock Central on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Mike Uva halfway home here as we navigate the 1 o'clock hour, which is football, and more football. I want to remind you, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway 2.0 is back. Go online to 1075thegame.com, click on the Media Reel tab, enter for your chance to win tickets to every home football game, every home baseball game, every home men's and women's basketball games for the upcoming 2024-2025 sports calendar. Just like last year, we're going to take 3 finalists out to our summer golf event at Charwood Golf Club at the end of the month and announce the overall winner there. Again, go online to 1075thegame.com and register for the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway 2.0. A lot of impromptu things happening here in the 1 o'clock hour. Stephen Garcia joining us for a couple minutes there in the last segment. Certainly appreciate him doing that. And as Mike Uva just said, as we were talking about with Wes earlier this morning, waiting to see Kendall Daniels where he was going to commit. It was a very interesting final couple of schools he was down to, including South Carolina. Wes couldn't comfortably say this morning if he thought the Gamecocks were going to get this one, but ended up being the winner when it came down to the end.
And just a heads up for those of you who aren't as familiar, because I understand recruiting has changed a lot over the last couple of years, especially with the transfer portal. There's some people that don't follow recruiting maybe as closely as they used to. This is a 2025 commitment. You know, we're in that period now where, you have some guys, that 2026 class, but this is a 2025 commitment. And when you look at that safety room, and I'm not trying to scare people, but, yeah, there's a possibility if Nick Emmanwori balls out this year, he might not be back next year. He might decide to go test the waters in the NFL. DQ Smith, he's going to be a senior next year if he decides to come back. And even if Emmanwori came back, he'd be a senior. Jalen Kilgore would be going into his junior year. So the whole point being is you're trying to reload, and that's not to write off any of the talent that is under those players, but certainly bringing in a 4-star talent from the state of Virginia, not bad. Not bad.
We were having this debate in the commercial break, and our guy Chris, who works down the hall at one of the other stations, helped us out. We're going to claim Virginia as the DMV, so we're going to put that as another notch in the belt of what Shane Beamer and his staff have been able to do, pulling guys out of that area, which, again, has been a hotbed for them his entire time here.
Yeah, I told Tyler that last year, I can't remember exactly where it was. It was somewhere in Virginia, though. And I said, another commitment for the Gamecocks from the DMV, and I got educated, on the geography of the DMV, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, if it's D, that's Delaware, or the DC area. See, here I'm already screwing things up. D for DC, M's going to be for Maryland, and V's just going to be the whole state of Virginia. That's how I look at it. But obviously, I'm not from that area, but that's how my pea-sized brain will look at it.
Chris, native Virginian, just gave us his two cents, and he said it's part of the DMV. So we'll claim that.
Thank you.
And if Carolina is able to get Jaden Gilchrist from Virginia Beach this weekend, there'll be another one from the DMV, and we'll claim that if it does happen.
And look, we saw during the Spurrier era, obviously we just had Steven on, during those days, they were able to create a very strong pipeline to the state of Florida. And we know that Spurrier, his Florida background, they were able to go in there and they were able to land plenty of talent. And of course, Garcia was one of them, being in from that area right outside of Tampa from Lutz. And we saw more. I mean, Shaq Wilson, and we can keep going down the list of the talent they were able to acquire from that area. Beamer has done a phenomenal job of being able to go into the DMV. He's been able to create that pipeline in Virginia. And when you think about it, and we've talked about so much in the past, when you look at the SEC, South Carolina is the closest. Like, it makes sense. Like, you should be able to. Now, you're going up against some big teams still, don't get me wrong, especially in the Big Ten and even the ACC. But Beamer has done a phenomenal job of being able to go up there. And I think more than anything, when you're able to just have success in an area, don't get me wrong, if you have talent here in the state, you got to make sure you do a good job of keeping it. They have been able to do that in the past couple of years.
Right.
But being able to go out of state and find an area, a hotbed in particular, like that DMV area, Beamer's been able to do it. And there's something to be said about that when you continue to see success year after year. Yeah, all these players might not necessarily come from the same school, but they're paying attention. I mean, that's one thing that Garcia mentioned to me in the past. That's one thing Shaq Wilson mentioned to me in the past about the Florida guys. We paid attention to who out of our state was going. We're going to South Carolina. It was just like, wait a minute, I know him. He's a dog.
Right.
You know, I might not have played against him. I see his, stats in the newspaper. That guy can play. Man, I want to go play with him.
Yeah, and you build up that rapport, and again, people talk, and especially when you're able to pull a guy like Nick Harbor out of that same area, then people really start paying attention and say, okay, what is South Carolina doing down there? Why do these guys want to keep going down there and playing for Coach Beamer? And that's how you build that pipeline down into an area like that. And I know this was a couple of weeks back when you and I were on together, and you had written the article for Gamecock Central about people's frustration with 3 stars. And why are we getting so many 3 stars? 3-star this, 3-star that. Since then, I mean, it's been a couple weeks since you wrote that. Carolina's actually done a pretty good job of bringing in a fair amount of 4 stars in the time being. Kendall Daniels being another one of those, including Lex Cyrus a couple weeks ago at the wide receiver spot as well. So this class is slowly coming together, maybe not as fast as some people wanted it to at the beginning and middle parts of this year, but we still got, 4 months until early signing day in December. Plenty of time for things to come together. Another 2 big-name guys, 4 stars prospects this weekend, still yet to make their commitments that could go to South Carolina too. So this class is coming along about how people expected it to, just a little bit slower than some of the other ones were.
And what's going to be interesting, too, obviously 2 things. One, how does South Carolina look to start the year? I know people will look at that and will wonder, okay, will that play a role with recruiting and keeping some of these guys? I think it does to an extent. I mean, I think there's some guys, they're not going to look at the record and be like, man, South Carolina, if God forbid they have a bad start, and be like, oh, I don't want to be part of that. There could be, you know, there could be some guys. But I think the other thing, too, is Darren Usher coming in, just being able to build some of these relationships. And now that he's been able to get acclimated these last couple of weeks, the expectation of what we expect to see from him, and I say we, you know, I'm talking about this area, it's going to continue to go up. I had a chance to catch up with Darren. We're going to have a story come out on Gamecock Central next week. Part of my new role in Gamecock Central, which is weird to say, Tyler, that as of yesterday, I am no longer the director of digital content. I went to change my Twitter bio. I am a freelance reporter now for Gamecock Central. It doesn't really feel that way because the last couple of days I've been treating it the same way as I typically would. But point being is there's going to be some more premium stories that I'll be doing. I'll be only writing a couple times a week now for Gamecock Central once I move up to Rhode Island next week. But I was very impressed with some of the things Darren had to say because I don't think he's talked publicly yet. So some good content that we have coming your way next week on Gamecock Central.
And he's somebody that, again, you don't pay a whole lot of attention to a guy in his role outside of when you make the hire, but he's somebody that with these past couple of commitments they've gotten the past few weeks, including Lex Cyrus, he's been a vital part of that. He hit the ground running as soon as he got to Carolina, and obviously you're seeing this come into effect so far. And again, what he's been able to do at places like Oregon and stuff like that certainly speaks for itself to continue on what's been a very solid run of recruiting classes for Shane Beamer here.
Yeah, and the question now becomes if they're able, are they going to be able to get back to a place where when the rankings are all said and done with recruiting, and I know the fan base probably cares a little bit more about that than the coaches.
Sure.
But being able to get back to a place where you feel good about this year's recruiting class. I know from the outsider standpoint, right, there's a portion of this fan base that has looked at the recruits and like, man, there's a lot of 3 stars in there. And like we've talked about, there'll be some guys that will move on up and they'll be ranked 4 stars. It happens every year across the country. South Carolina has done a very good job with identifying some of those players. I mean, you look at Matthew Fuller last year, you look at Fred Johnson, 2 guys who were 3 stars, and then when it was all said and done, they're 4 stars. And those are 2 players in particular that this fan base, they're like, man, I can't wait to see what they can do in the coming years. So being able to land a 4-star like this today, especially at a position that you're going to need to reload, it's going to be interesting to see what type of momentum they're able to carry into the regular season and hopefully be able to pick up some more big-time commits once they have some of these players come on campus and take visits during the season.
And again, it's all about development at the end of the day. It's all about what you do when these guys get here because, and star ratings can be subjective. You have guys that can play at lower classifications against not the best competition and ball out there and look amazing. When they get to college, they're not ready for the bright lights of playing against SEC competition. It's what you can do as a coaching staff in practice and camp and all that kind of stuff to get those guys from point A where they're at when they come in to point B where they need to play at this level and be good enough to maybe even play at the NFL level one day as well. So it's a process. And again, we get hung up on star ratings because that's what the only indications we have coming out of high school of how good or bad these guys are going to be, but they are not always the end-all be-all.
No, and development is the most important. I had a nice conversation with Sterling Lucas about a week ago following the Birdies with Beamer golf outing with the media. And that was one thing that he talked about. And one of the reasons why he feels like he's been able to have a lot of success with recruiting is that when he talks with these players, he's like, look, I understand what it looks like if you want to go play in the NFL because I've been up there. I've coached in the NFL.
Right.
This is what we would expect for you to do if you come here. This is what we can do to make you better. And what's your ultimate goal? You want to get to the NFL? We can help you get there because look at the guys that have come through here. So that's why, in particular, when you look at that edge room and the tremendous job that Sterling Lucas has been able to do from a recruiting standpoint, that's why it's as loaded as it's been. And you can look at other positions. I mean, Torian Gray has done a phenomenal job with development, the number of either freshman All-Americans or you go back to even his first year with Jalen Foster when he was named an All-American. I mean, the development factor is certainly high at multiple positions, but obviously I know from a fan standpoint they want to see the wins, and I totally get that, and hopefully it will translate into that, certainly starting this year, but sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Consistently.
Absolutely. And we'll come back. We'll wrap up hour number 2. It is the halftime show. He's Mike Uva from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head, along with you on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva, along with you on your Friday here on the game. It is time for our Firehouse Subs text of the hour, 803-404-6100. I've actually had a couple people that have asked this on the text line, but in regards to where Terry is, he's been dealing with some family stuff this week, been out all week, but he should be back at the beginning of next week. So I appreciate everybody's concern, and I've been talking with him back and forth. Things seems to be okay with him up there in Maryland, so hopefully he will be back at the beginning of next week, and we'll kind of get back to normal. But that is where Terry is for those that were curious. I get it. When you don't hear from somebody in a couple days on the radio, you always kind of assume the worst. But no, Terry's good. Terry's good.
And lighten the mood, we can just say maybe Terry's up there helping recruit in the DMV.
You know what?
You know?
Kendall Daniels commits today. Terry's been up there all week.
Just saying.
Maybe he was putting in a little bit of last-minute work.
There's another DMV possible commitment for the Gamecocks this week, and I'm just saying.
He's a sleeper agent for Coach Beamer and staff when it comes to recruiting. I wanted to get to this because you mentioned a little bit earlier, and we can't gloss over this. Coach Beamer took about a minute and a half yesterday to detail. This is a question about Nick Harbor initially, but he took a minute and a half to detail his son Hunter's experience with college football 25 up to this point.
First of all, the game's amazing, isn't it? I mean, we had a little tournament last week with our players, and then my son's been playing it, but he had it in his room last week, and we were playing at the house here in Columbia, and just the fact that you can now get, what is it, Glory Road or Glory whatever, where you get recruited and all that. Road to Glory, I think that's what it is. Don't act like y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Y'all have played it. But he chose to go to a school in the game because they promised him the starting quarterback job as well. So clearly I failed with my son in that whatnot. And then he tells me he started playing a season with the team that he went to. He went and played for Mississippi State because Mississippi State promised him the starting quarterback job. And then I saw him the next day, and I asked him how the season was going. And he told me that he was having academic issues, so he was suspended for a game as well. And I'm like, God almighty, like I got 120 in our program that I can't even get my own son straight with the video game as well. But then he also told me that he's now entered the transfer portal because some other school in this game is promising different stuff as well. So I say that the game's unbelievable, almost too real in a lot of ways, clearly. And I wonder why I struggle with things as the head football coach, because that's what everybody's dealing with now in the game.
What kind of coach can't even get his own son to commit to his school? Shameful.
It's unbelievable. I tell you, man, NIL, it's really changed. And I mean, and Shane has said in the past, he's not going to promise a starting spot.
That's what I was going to say. Right? That actually kind of holds true to his message of like, hey, we preach competitiveness, we preach competition. So he technically shouldn't have offered his son a starting quarterback job, if we're being honest here.
You know what I love, though? Every year, it seems like it's around this time at the introductory press conference to kick off the season. There's been some times in season too. Hunter holds Shane accountable, man. Like, he holds him accountable. He's not gonna, take the home count discount. Like, he's gonna do what he feels like is best for him. And one thing that I remember, I think it was one of the first couple interviews when Beamer was hired here, and he was putting a staff together. Hunter asked him if he was going to go out and try to bring like Nick Saban in and Dabo Sweeney.
Yeah.
And
hey, shoot for the stars.
And I can't remember exactly what it was last year. He said something along the lines of, he had like a school play maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
And Hunter's like, you should be back in the office, like watching more film. Like, it's just,
I don't know if it was him or if it was another kid. I think it might have been another kid that was there.
Yeah, that's right.
That was like, hey, why are you here? Why aren't you watching film?
Hunter it may have been trick-or-treating. I can't remember. He's like, maybe you shouldn't go trick-or-treat. But point being is, that is the third generation of a future Beamer coach right there.
There
I'm just assuming Hunter's going to be a coach.
Why not?
I love it. Hunter and the Beamer family as a whole. I mean, just football's in their blood.
We'll see how the virtual quarterback career plays out first.
Yeah, we need updates. We need updates.
Every week at the press conference, we need an update on how that's going. See, I went on my road to glory. I decided to go to Arizona State because it's party school quarterback.
It's a party school, huh?
Yeah, it's party school. I know we wouldn't have to worry about academics there, so I'm all good.
Because again, I feel like I'm missing out. I just see like the tweets and people talking about it on the message board.
Sure.
It is unbelievable, like how realistic this game feels like. And again, this is as someone that has not had the opportunity to play it, was a big fan growing up playing it. I mean, Road to Glory, as Beamer mentioned. I remember when that came out,
or Glory Road, as he said.
Glory Road. It is incredible, though, how realistic, and it's kind of scary, too.
Sure.
Because when you look at it, it's just like, yeah, this is kind of where college athletics are, you know, and, you know, it opens up a whole can of worms when you really want to break down the good and bad. And I don't want to get upset at a video game, but it's just the reality of there's so much more going on. You know, NIL's going. I think Peter Burns actually mentioned in his Road to Glory that he was focused too much on his off-the-field brand.
Sure.
And it made him academically ineligible.
Well, I'm glad to know I'm not the only one that's been completely sucked into this game. I've been thinking about it all day because it's been a busier week because normally Terry is the one putting the show together, so I've had to do it this week. With him being out, I haven't had a chance to hop on the sticks since Saturday of last week, so my first goal when I go home is get a little bit of playtime in before the weekend really hits. So I've been thinking about that all day, but no, we definitely need updates as this year progresses on how that virtual Road to Glory career is going.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe he'll be able to get him to transfer on in. Beamer has had success with the transfer portal, and certainly they need to be able to have some success in the real world with some of the players that they were able to acquire this offseason, because if they're able to do that, man, there could be some good stuff. So who knows? Maybe he can get Hunter to flip in the virtual world.
Maybe so. That would add to the already long list of recruiting accomplishments that Beamer and Company have done so far. And again, for anybody that's just kind of tuning in, we did get a commitment from 4-star safety Kendall Daniels out of the DMV. Virginia's in the DMV. We have decided that is a true fact out of the DMV today, starting what is a busy weekend for commitments because a couple other guys getting set to make their commitments coming up tomorrow to hopefully add to what's coming together to be a nice class for South Carolina for 2025.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how things play out as So we just had Steven Garcia on,
right?
And he just posted a tweet, and he tweeted at Luke Doty saying, thanks for the recommendation. He's at Jack Brown's right now holding up a Stale Hands IPA.
Nice.
So Steven Garcia, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Speaking of quarterbacks, you got players, you got a text from another player that was none too fond of the Heat today, to say the least.
I won't say who the player is. Don't want to get anyone in trouble. But can I pull up? They just texted me, and you can tell that they're not from this area.
Sure.
Said, bro, that was so hot. Bro, that was so hot.
Today's mild. The highs in the high 80s. Wait till you get to 100.
It was so humid. It was so humid. And again, I've been down here long enough to know, like, it gets hotter down here, but that humidity, it was. And people are wearing long sleeves. I don't think they're going to wear long sleeves tomorrow if they wore long sleeves today.
I certainly would not. 2 hours down, 1 more hour to go. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva, along with you on your Friday here on The Game. Hour number 3, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva. The party's really getting started now because Elijah Campbell has jumped in to the producer studios. We're shuffling some things around. It's Friday, guys. 1 more hour to go. Well, you guys got 3 more hours after this, but you know what I mean. Getting into the weekend. The last weekend without football, by the way, as we are locked and loaded starting next week with NFL preseason all the way through mid-February.
That's a pretty good trade. You guys get football and you ship me out. So, I mean, you guys won in the trade.
Well, I mean, you're still...
Rhode Island's losing in the trade. They get me.
You're
Poor
still
guys.
kind of ish around, contributing to Gamecock Central. We'll have you on. We'll get the insight into the Patriots and things like that from you.
No, we talked about it the other day when I filled in. I mean, I'm still going to be very active with Gamecock coverage on Twitter. I mean, it's just going to, be a little bit less on Gamecock Central, but I can tell you right now, because someone asked me, maybe it's Steve Fink, I'll name drop him. He asked me, he's like, how are you going to do this from afar? And I'm just like, well, I still talk to people like in the
connections.
In the program. Honestly, the God's honest truth, if like people are out there to, trying to get into the business, you can cover a team in a totally different part of the country. You know what I learned, and we all had to deal with this? During that COVID year, if you didn't have connections, you didn't have relationships, it didn't mean anything because essentially you were like covering a team from afar.
Sure. Because
you weren't able to be at press conferences. You had Zoom interviews and stuff. But, things have really changed over the last couple of years since COVID. But that's the biggest thing I learned.
So what's trending at 2 here on The Game. Last night, the NFL Hall of Fame game, which was cut short by rain after ending only about 2.5 quarters there. Not that it matters. It's a preseason game anyway. But we do have the 2024 NFL or Pro Football Hall of Fame class going in this weekend. Dwight Freeney, Devin Hester, Andre Johnson, Julius Peppers, Patrick Willis, Randy Gradshear, and then Steve McMichael. And this is a cool class for somebody like me because this is a full class almost of guys that I remember growing up watching.
You feel old?
A little bit. Because I'm like, wow, I remember when Andre Johnson was in his prime, Devin Hester returning the opening kick of the Super Bowl. I'm getting in that area, and I'm only 28. I'm not trying to say, old man yelling at cloud here, but
Thanks.
it is interesting.
Getting older this week and make me feel even older.
It is interesting to think about wow, these are guys that I watched their entire careers of now going into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and for a guy like Julius Peppers, right, we're in the Carolinas. I remember when he came back with his second stint with the team. I remember covering him when I was at Watch Fox. And it was just weird to see him because you think about Julius Peppers when he first got into the league and just how dominant he was. And I know he went to the other Carolina school. I know he went to North Carolina. But here's a guy that, did some incredible things in college, was able to live up to the hype once he made it to the pros, and will be one of those guys that, Panther fans will be excited to see get inducted officially.
I'm still convinced the secret to his success was the black visor. Because when you have the black visor, that ups your intensity by 10 points.
You're the hardest player in the league when you have that dark tint of a visor. Instant intimidation factor.
Exactly. And seeing that guy lined up against you and you can't see his eyes.
No.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and at that point, I remember in Pop Warner, I wanted the visor, everyone watched. So we found some really crappy version, and I think they had literally you were taping it on and
right.
Rope, or I don't even know what the heck it was. It was so makeshift. And these
felt
things,
so cool.
And these things would fog up so quick. But I remember we tried to get the slightly tinted one, and they're like, nope, can't do it because of concussions.
Right.
So, thanks, Julius Peppers, and all the NFL guys that wore cool visors.
Devin Hester, obviously the return freak. 20 total return touchdowns, 14 of those being punt returns. Had the opening touchdown in the Super Bowl. The only guy to do that.
Where do you stand
in a Super Bowl?
Where do you stand on specialists making the Hall of Fame?
For somebody like him, 1,000%.
He changed the game.
He absolutely changed the game. Now, and we'll get to the kickoff rules in a minute here. As the kickoff rules changed, a person like him became less and less important because just kickoffs weren't as prevalent as they once were.
Yep.
I think a guy could have Matthew Slater make the Hall of Fame? He was only a special teams guy with the Patriots, but he was a good one.
Yeah, the number of Pro Bowls he made because of what he was able to do as a gunner. I think here's the thing. You look at any sport. Now, football, it's all right, there's 3 phases, but you look at any sport, if you're making an impact in the game in some shape, way, or form, and you're the best at, or one of the best, or you've changed the game the way that Devin Hester did it,
sure,
it's tough for me to say, hey, let's tell the story about the National Football League without Devin Hester.
Yeah.
Same way with, like, would it be like a Ray Guy or Adam Vinatieri should
Morton
be in the Hall of
Anderson.
Fame, right? Like, there's guys that, like, you can't tell the story of the NFL without. Now, there's going to be people that will look at it and be like, all right, is it as sexy maybe in comparison to some of the quarterback numbers or wide receiver or even like a safety like Ed Reed or whatever the case may be? Maybe not. But at the same time, too, it's part of the game. And, yeah, I mean, Devin Hester, literally, he changed the way people approach special teams. You had teams that would go out there and be like, okay, we're going to just kick it out of bounds. Like, even if we have to take a penalty on kickoff, we'll try to kick it out of the end zone. But depending on the wind, it's like, you know what? Let's just kick it out. Let's let them start, around midfield because we feel like that gives us a better shot opposed to kicking it deep and seeing if this guy who, by the way, we talk about Nick Harbor being a 99 in speed. Devin Hester, the first and only player in Madden to be 100 in speed. I remember that came out.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. He was a marvel to watch. He eventually got to the Falcons at the tail end of his career, but the kickoff rules had changed so much by that point in time. It completely neutered what his skill set was.
It was such a shame because I think around that time or maybe right before him, you had X Factor, Dante Hall.
Yep.
I mean, you had some talented return specialists, and I know you said we'll get into it, but that's one of the reasons why a guy like, Marion Brown, why he's going to have an opportunity to make the Cleveland Browns and why they brought him in as a free agent because of the kickoff rules changing. That's why I'm excited because special teams is such a big part. And granted, special teams is where I kind of made my bread and butter because where I buttered my roll. Is that what you say?
That's a little too
I don't know what the
R-rated for this program.
I don't know what the actual
that does
saying
sound saucy
is.
right there.
Yeah, it does.
Elijah,
I'll just move on.
Let's hit cut 35. This is Joe Buck explaining the new kickoff procedures at the Hall of Fame game last night.
Have seen in the NFL. Teams kick off from the 35. The 10 players in the kicking team start at the opponent's 40. At least 9 receiving team players must be in the setup zone between their own 30 and 35. Play begins when the ball's touched or hits the ground in the end zone or landing zone, the area between the receiving team's goal line and the 20. Touchbacks that land in the end zone are brought out to the 30. Touchbacks that roll into the end zone from the landing zone are brought out to the 20. You got all that? We're going to hang on for dear life tonight, but man, is it going to be fun to watch this unfold.
I hope you wrote all that down. There will be a test later. But I was excited to watch the game last night purely to see this play and how it looked. And I thought Ryan Clark on ESPN made a good point after. It looks clunky and it looks weird because we're so used to what kickoffs have looked like for 100+ years in football. It's going to take time to adapt to this, but what it's going to do for the game, there's only one touchback last night. We had multiple returns. I think the farthest one got out to the 32-yard line. It's going to bring back that play to football that's been dead for a long time because last year, 78% of kickoffs in the NFL were touchbacks. That's unacceptable. We can't have that. The play needs to matter. And like you said, there are guys that make entire careers out of being special teamers that we've completely neutered over the past decade that hopefully will make a comeback.
So I was watching the game last night with a handful of former Gamecock football players, and some of them just hated this rule. They hated this rule. And what I said is I asked them this, and it got some of them to flip. Some of them were still like, I said, for me, I loved the old kickoff rule. I loved the way it was.
Sure.
You kicked it. We talked about the Dante Hall days, right? And the Devin Hester and just what it was able to do for the game, the excitement on kickoff. Instead of, oh, man, special teams is, all right, this is just an extra time to be able to go to the bathroom, go grab a drink, whatever.
It became ceremonial.
Kind of
like do it because we've always done
the old PAT for a while.
Exactly.
So my question to them was, would you rather have what we've been seeing, which is essentially just, all right, we're just going to kick it out of the end zone, we're just wasting everyone's time, or would you rather see this? If you can't have the old, what would you rather have? And it was just like, you know what? Yeah, because at least after a couple kickoffs, and they're watching it, they're like, all right, nothing was broken.
Sure.
No one broke a big return last night, but you can look at it and be like, all right, there's some strategy there.
There is.
It's going to change the game. I'm telling you right now, if this goes well, this will happen in college football at some point in the near future.
1,000%. And it's important to know, like you said, the reason the NFL changed the rule, I think 2011 or around that time when they changed it, moving the kickoff up to 35, which started leading to so many more touchbacks, was because this is the most dangerous play. When you have guys running down the field at full speed at each other, you're going to get concussions. You're going to get bad injuries and stuff like that. And the NFL as safety conscious as they are, made that change, and they were not going to change it back. So, like you said, you either have the old way or you have this new way that's going to look a little different, look a little clunky to start off with, but it's going to bring this play back to prominence.
Yeah, and they try to do everything they could to still keep kickoff the way that it was, the kickoff rules. I mean, they eliminated the wedge, right? I mean, you couldn't have, before, shoot, you could have, it was like watching like WWE. Two guys and essentially just clotheslining guys, right? Minus the clotheslining, or roller derby for any roller derby fans out there. Remember that? So, yeah, they did what they could. And again, I loved the old kickoff style. But I understand why they went away from it. I'm going to give this a chance. I liked it by watching it in the XFL and the USFL, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
I've liked watching it in the past. I think it will make the game on that part of it, that element of the game, more exciting. And if it can make that more exciting, opposed to, all right, this guy's just going to kick it out of the end zone and we're just wasting time here, that's a good thing. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, last night was the first introduction of it, reading what a lot of special teams coordinators around the league have been saying. It's really challenging them to approach it in different ways. And they were talking about it last night. I forget which team was doing it which way, but one side was doing it like a punt return. Another side was treating it like a run play almost. Yep. There's different ways you can scheme up the blocks. And again, that was with the B to C level talent in the NFL playing it last night. All those guys were backups or guys trying to make the team. When you get the elite of the elite out there playing it on Sundays, it's going to be a different story.
And I've heard stories of teams that have already looked into potentially having like a safety, like someone that kicked in high school, right? Someone that can tackle, and putting him back there, knowing like, hey, all right, if this happens, like we have a guy back there, like we just have to put it in the spot. We just have to put it in the spot. And the matchups that are going to take place, too. From talking to a couple NFL coaches and talking to analysts, scouts. I was with a scout a couple weeks ago. We were talking about this. The need for speed on kickoff, on the kickoff team, you're going to start seeing like some of those smaller guys, whether it be a corner, right? You're going to see more outside linebackers, defensive end, guys who are good at shedding blocks and being able to make those tackles coming off a block in comparison to in years past. You might see some of those smaller guys who have speed.
And on the flip side of that, the return team, you're probably going to see the Travis Kelce's, guys like that. Your stars on offense have to be put out there to block and things like that, or return, whatever it may be, because this completely changes how you approach kickoff.
I'm just waiting for that first one in the NFL. I think. Do we think it's going to happen in preseason?
What, a return?
Yeah. I'm talking about a touchdown.
Yeah, with the high
over under 0.5 for preseason football game.
Give me that over.
Will there be one that for a touchdown?
I will, just because again, there's so many returns now. It almost can't not happen, right? That's 4 total weeks. However many games that's going to be, I feel like we get at least one.
And we talk about lane discipline, or back in the day, at least with kickoff. Things are a little different now, right? So this is still new to everybody. All it takes is one person to screw up their assignment, and good night, Irene.
And again, every team has their own strategy about this. One team is going to do it better than everybody else, and they're going to nail it. And it's like, oh, this is what everybody else is going to start doing now.
You might have some guys that decide to pull, and set up like a mini wedge on one side, a little wall.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think it's great. I'm excited to see it this year, and it might be something that comes to college football down the line. We're talking about it. Exactly.
When's the last time we talked kickoff like in a positive manner? It's been years.
Exactly. So certainly exciting to see how that plays out for the first year in the NFL. We come back. I was on with Mike Gillespie yesterday, and he posed a question to me that we didn't have time to get to, but I really want to get your guys' thoughts on this because it's been burning in my mind ever since. With that coming up next, it is the halftime show. Mike Uva, Tyler Head, and Elijah Campbell on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva, Elijah Campbell hanging out with you on this Friday. Reminder, the greatest moments in Gamecock sports since the year 2000. Continuing on the 107.5 The Game Twitter page, we've had our polls going on a week. I believe we also have a consolation poll up today as well for the ones that did not make it into the initial round, correct?
They were the ones that finished second.
Ones that finished second, okay.
Yeah,
because we had
second place finish.
There were some days the options were really tough to pick from.
Yesterday, I mean, every option got at least 21% of the vote. It was very even. And it came down to the last hour of it being up. That was the closest one we have yet by far.
So we're going to take the winners. We're going to put them in another poll coming up next week, and we are going to decide the greatest Gamecock moment since the year 2000, officially on August 12th, and we'll talk about that on that day, all sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. Okay, yesterday, me and Gillespie were doing the show, and it got towards the end, and we were talking about the transfer portal, and he posed a question to me that we did not have time to dive into, but I really want to talk about. He said, if the current NIL and transfer portal rules had always existed, what superstar player would have transferred from their respective school? I immediately thought of Christian McCaffrey, because unless he was just that tied to academics at Stanford, there was no way Alabama, Ohio State, somebody wouldn't have thrown a bag of money at him to come play for them, right? See what I'm getting at here?
The demand would have been so high.
Exactly.
Get him out here on the East Coast, or at least somewhere
where he would have won the Heisman, by the way. If he was not at Stanford, he would have won the Heisman in 2015. I will die on that hill.
ACC great.
ACC great.
Legend.
Christian McCaffrey. Mm-hmm. Exactly like Katie Ledecky. Here. Exactly.
Well, I said I wasn't going to. I was talking to Chris yesterday because you guys were talking about this, and I don't mean this by any slight, but this is something that we're going to see now. Like, Corey Miller is going to be part of the SEC Legends.
Retroactive history.
Right? But Texas is coming into the SEC now. Oklahoma,
And it's funny because initially we're going to be able to make that difference, right? But like me, who was not alive in the 80s, when I think of George Rogers, I think of the SEC.
Yeah.
He was not an SEC running back, but it's been so long, I just put two and two together like, in the 80s.
I think that's what it is. It sounds weird because when I hear, and again, I'm just using Corey, had a chance to work with him at Watch, and I've said this before, if it wasn't for Corey, I wouldn't be in Columbia. I look at that and I'm just like, oh yeah, South Carolina's been part of the SEC for, over 3 decades now. Like, that makes sense to me. But again, it's because of Stanford. It's so weird to say a school from California, but Stanford joining the ACC right now, it's just like, huh?
Yeah. Well, after a period of time, we're going to be able to say Spencer Rattler went from one SEC school to the other, going from Oklahoma to South Carolina. And that'll be a true statement, but he didn't actually do that. But people are going to think that.
But he played.
Exactly.
In the Big 12, yes. Well, let's make a distinction between the school he played for and what conference he played in.
Right. So when I pose this prompt, are there names that come to mind? Because I have a couple here.
Yeah.
Start off with Christian McCaffrey.
Ooh, I'm going to have one that probably will tick off this fan base, because I know that for a period of time, if you're from Rock Hill, you go to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Like, I get that, the history. But, and maybe he would say no, but this is just, again, Clowney. And here's why. Clowney, especially after the hit.
Yes.
And going into that final season, and we all remember, and I said we remember, I followed it from afar, but I've educated myself enough to know that going into that next season, going into his junior year, there were things like, all right, is this guy gonna, is he gonna play? Is he
Should he just sit out the entire year and be the number one draft pick?
It's hard.
Remember the conversation.
It's hard for me not to at least entertain the thought of, okay, what if someone said, hey, Clowney, you want to come here? We get some money. Like, we can all sit here and admit tampering goes on. It goes on everywhere. Even though in this era of NIL, it goes on.
Sure.
So it's hard for me to believe that if even in this era, that someone at another school wouldn't have thrown a bunch of money. I'm sure South Carolina would have done everything they could to keep Clowney.
Right.
But that's one that just comes to mind. Like, man, like, hey, you know what? Yeah, you can come over here. Don't worry about playing that. Give you a bunch of money if you come here.
I have 2 Heisman-winning quarterbacks for 2 completely different reasons.
Okay.
One, Andre Ware. Houston has a lot of good resources, but the guy put up video game numbers.
Okay.
You couldn't tell me that if NIL was available there and transfer portal was an option for players, that another school that, likes to throw the ball around, like maybe like a Notre Dame or something,
sure,
would be like, oh my God, we got to get this guy on our team. Like
right.
He would have been such a hot commodity that like winning a bidding war against Houston, which again, solid resources, but not the best.
Right.
I think he could have easily been outbid, right? That's one. And the other, because solely on personality alone and erratic behavior, Johnny Manziel.
Do you think they would have been able to outbid Texas A&M, though? Because they got a lot of money out there in Texas.
He got himself in a lot of trouble in Texas. I think he could, with a new change of scenery, Oregon maybe. Oregon would be able to outbid them. Ohio State.
I'm glad you brought this up. Could you imagine the bidding war between Texas and Texas A&M over Johnny Manziel? Like, he has an entire other commitment ceremony if he's staying or if he's going.
Kind of like the decision with LeBron.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, he would run that up so much. Like, and
ESPN would air it, by the way.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, he'd probably have it in Las Vegas.
A&M with that oil money, though. You just never know.
That oil money, they would be able to pony up. But, I mean, I could imagine like an Ohio State or which Texas has an athletic department in general is like the second most profitable athletic department.
I mean, they're buying Lamborghinis for their kids now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could easily be wooed by that, and his behavior is just so erratic and unpredictable that there's no telling what the guy would do. It would make an off season with Johnny Manziel one of the more fascinating case studies in modern college football if he were to be playing today.
How about Lamar Jackson? You think he stays at Louisville if he had the option to go anywhere and take money? Absolutely not.
No. Oh, the schools that would bid for Lamar Jackson would just be...
It'd be insane.
It'd be an abhorrent list of schools that would be throwing him ungodly amounts of money.
Here's a little bit of an under-the-radar one. How about Dak Prescott? His final year of college was 2015. 2014 was the great year.
I remember covering that season. I was in Mississippi that year.
The first ever #1 team in the college football playoff bowl. Very good quarterback. I feel like he would have had a lot of options to go somewhere else for that final year.
I can see that because, again, being down there, Mississippi State, they came off a phenomenal season. Dak had all the hype around him. That season didn't pan out anywhere close to how Mississippi State wanted it to go. Ole Miss had a good year. They had Swag Kelly there that season.
Who could forget Swag Kelly?
But yeah, Dak, I could see that. I mean, he was close. He did have a really good relationship with Dan Mullen, but I would not put that past. That's a good one.
By the way, I've always said that Chad Kelly is great value Johnny Manziel, and you can't convince me otherwise.
You're right. In terms of like erraticism on a football field, yeah, absolutely. Like the total yin and yang of a high risk, high reward quarterback, definitely. But another one like that I thought of is like players that played on loaded teams that didn't get their shot till later. So like imagine like a Willis McGahee at Miami who had to sit behind
honestly,
Clinton Portis
like
and a couple other loaded.
Half of the early 2000s Miami teams could have been viable options.
What about that Alabama wide receiver room?
Oh,
or running back room. I mean, they get praised so much, and rightfully so. Of, okay, you know what, waiting your turn, or even the quarterback situation in that room, like the number of guys that went on to the NFL. And I know, look, did things work out for Mac Jones in New England? No, but at the end of the day, still got drafted.
Sure.
The number of quarterbacks in that room. So just a lot of players at Alabama. Quarterback room, running back room, wide receiver room. Because you mentioned, and you see it in basketball a lot, where maybe another guy is getting the shine, and you could win. It's just like, all right, we did that, but now I want mine. I want mine.
The disease of me.
Yep. So
as Pat Riley would call
that's
it.
another one.
If you have any thoughts, Firehouse Subs text line 834-404-6100. We'll get into some of those before we close out the show today. But coming up next, it's August 2nd. It's the greatest day in the history of the world. On the halftime show, Tyler, Mike, and Elijah, along with you here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva, Elijah Campbell along with you on your Friday. It is indeed time for the greatest day in the history of the world, August the 2nd. Obviously, a lot of Olympic things happened on this day, including in 1996. The star-studded U.S. men's basketball team, Dream Team version 3 as they were known, beat Yugoslavia 95-69 to win the gold medal at the Olympics in Atlanta that year. And obviously, men's basketball has quite a long history when it comes to winning gold medals in basketball.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this the other day, and maybe this is just an awful way to look at it. This is like looking at the glass half empty. Imagine being part of that next U.S. Olympics men's basketball team who doesn't win the gold. And hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's just like you expect them to. I think that they've lost it, once in the last 8 Olympics, something like that?
2004.
Yes,
yep.
2004. Here's the roster for that 1996 team. Charles Barkley, Grant Hill, Anthony Hardaway, David Robinson, Scottie Pippen, Mitch Richmond, Reggie Miller, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Shaquille O'Neal, Gary Payton, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Good Lord.
It's a pretty good roster.
Who's your starting 5?
Yes.
Just kidding. That's going to...
Yes.
That will... Yes. Who's your starting 5? Yes.
Yes. Now have you been bothered by Jason Tatum not starting the first game?
To a point where you guys were on the show the other day, and I texted both you and
Jack.
Yeah. And I said, what was my exact quote? I think I said something along the line of
Steve Kerr's a bum, something like that.
Oh, Kerr is a clown. Quote
That's
me.
what it was. Yeah.
Yep. I stand by that.
Not hiding the emotions by any means.
Nope.
So since it is Friday, we'll extend greatest day in the history of the world on into the weekend. A couple very important birthdays. One of them being Mike Uva's.
Well, yeah, on the 4th. I thought we were talking Tom Brady. I'm more excited about Brady.
I could lead with you.
Yeah.
Which I think it's funny that you guys were born a day apart.
Yeah. I'm sure he tells his friends the exact same thing.
Yeah, that Uva guy.
I know he does. Yeah. I've heard him quote it.
But your birthday on the 4th, Twami's. Did I do that right?
Twami.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
47 years
Tommy,
old.
Terrific. I don't know if David Cloninger is listening. I love DC over the Post and Courier. I mean, he's been a tremendous friend since I've got down here, and he does an outstanding job. He's a big time 49ers fan.
Mm-hmm.
So he always tries to remind me that Joe Montana is better. I'm like, listen, man. I said, give me the 7 rings. Oh, he's undefeated in the Super. I said, that's great. I said, so you're going to punish the guy because he made it to more Super Bowls? Like, come on. Stop it. If anything, I mean, shoot, they should have beat the Eagles, but I don't know.
Also, football's a team sport.
It is.
Elshon still reminds me of that. He has fun with it. He's like, yeah. He's like, Tom would have had 8 if it wasn't for me. I said, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, and Nick Foles turned into Superman for a couple weeks and then went back to being Nick Foles after that.
That game was unbelievable. I mean, there was and then we went like the next Super Bowl and there was just like no offense.
Yeah.
Like no punting.
It was the Atlanta Super Bowl, and I was very disappointed because everybody forgets about that game.
Because the Saints should have been playing in there, for being honest.
Pat DeMarco's in town. Well,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Pat DeMarco, I don't know if he's listening because he might be with Garcia. I'm not going to say anything about the Falcons. I like Pat, and yeah.
I'm sure Tyler appreciates that too.
Well, we actually got him to open up about the Super Bowl leading up to this year's Super Bowl. We spent like an hour, me and Preston did, with him detailing what happened. It was a good conversation. I apologize for ripping the Band-Aid off, but he opened up about it. It was pretty interesting.
No, Pat's awesome, and I'm glad that him and Steven are doing a podcast together. And from learning some of the other things that are going to go into it, Gamecock fans, and not just Gamecock fans, but just fans of sport and NFL and everything else in between, as Garcia kind of hinted at it. There's a lot that's going to go into this, and the first guess is electric.
Getting back to Tom Brady's birthday, do we think Giselle text him happy birthday, or is there no acknowledgement? It doesn't have to have emojis or a GIF, but just hey, happy birthday.
Well, I was gonna say you don't text your ex happy birthday. But then again,
it's the mother, the father of the children.
Yeah.
There is a more intimate relationship there, even though they're not together. So you're acknowledging, hey, it's your birthday, happy birthday type.
Let's take it a step further.
Okay.
Giselle texts Tom happy birthday. Does he say thanks? Does he even acknowledge it, or does he just react with a little thumbs up?
Ooh,
Yeah, he's just hitting it with a like.
He seems like a thumbs up guy.
The thumbs up, I think, is almost kind of worse than the no reply, because you're acknowledging that you saw it, but you're not putting forth any kind of like response.
And now that we're on the subject, if my good friend Wes Mitchell is on here, and I'm going to bust his chops a little bit, he's a big thumbs up guy. He's a big reaction guy.
I know that from being in group text with him, which like for certain information, that's fine. But when it is something a little more like personal, like a birthday or congratulations or something like that, I don't think the thumb is like the best way to go with it personally.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. I'm an emoji guy, but I might hit it with a thumbs up, and then I always feel like obligated to say something else afterwards. I feel like I come off as rude, and I have just like a perpetual fear of coming off as rude.
You know, here I am. I'm the Yankee.
Unless I'm trying
and Wes is the Southerner, right? You know, Southern hospitality, and he's hitting me with the thumbs up. Unbelievable.
Flips your world upside down. Your whole preconceived notion of the South completely ruined there.
Yeah. Bless your heart.
Unrelated, my sister just texted me and said she's introducing her kids, who are 10 and 7 respectively, to Justin Bieber's Baby for the first time. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
So, yeah, Tom Brady's birthday is tomorrow. I don't know how to respond to it.
I don't either. That's okay. Greatest day in the history of the world, right?
There we go.
We'll hit our Firehouse Subs text of the hour. 803-404-6200. Got a lot of you weighing in on our conversation about players that would have transferred from their respective schools if the current transfer portal and NIL rules were in effect back then. That's coming up next. It's Halftime Show here on The Game.
I didn't know what to say.
Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva, Elijah Campbell wrapping up today's edition, halftime or post-game show with Jay and Elijah coming up next here on The Game. I posed the question earlier. We talked about it in the 2:15 segment. If the current NIL rules and transfer portal rules had always existed, what are some guys that definitely would have transferred out from their respective teams? Got some good answers on the text line here. How about LaDainian Tomlinson from TCU? Was it 230 yards he had in that one game?
It was around there. I mean, that's a good one.
Absolute monster. Ben Roethlisberger at Miami of Ohio.
See, that's
definitely.
That's a good pick because you think of some of these smaller school guys that would have had opportunities, right? Group 5 guys to be able to move on up. That would be a good one.
Josh Cribbs.
There you go.
Deep cut. Akron. Go Zips. Or Kent State.
Khalil Mack.
Kent State.
Oh, yep.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Not the Bills. The Bulls.
Shout out Pete Lembo.
Chad weighs in. How about Randy Moss? Now, Randy Moss was at Florida State.
He had an opportunity with Notre Dame
before, and he ended up at Marshall because of issues. But
I love watching Randy Moss Marshall highlights. It's just it's like watching a deer.
It's not fair.
Oh, dude, yeah. It was one-on-ones with some poor corner from like Appalachian State. It was ball game. Like it was so fun to watch.
That is one of those things, much like Cam Newton when he played at Auburn. It was like a men playing with like children, right? Yep. Like he was clearly head and shoulders more talented than everybody out there.
Saying Appalachian State too reminded me, can you imagine what the market would be for Armonte Edwards after the Michigan upset?
Ooh.
If he had any eligibility left. I couldn't remember if that was his like senior year or not off the top of my head, but if he had eligibility after that.
I think it was.
Those DMs would be flooded.
By the way, you can't say Armonte Edwards' name around Colin Taylor or he'll spontaneously combust.
Got some good ones after just typing something into the old Google search engine.
All right.
Joe Flacco. See, you're gonna notice a theme here with smaller school guys. Steve McNair.
Oh, definitely.
Aaron McNair.
I mean, in the mid-'90s, getting drafted that high out of Alcorn State, like that's how you know that word of mouth was spreading.
Oh, here's one. Terrell Owens, Chattanooga.
Oh yeah, go Mocs.
This one, I don't know if he would, because he has family in the area. But Jerry Rice, he went to Mississippi Valley State.
Right.
And Willie Taunton was his quarterback. The only reason I know that is from my days working in the Delta. But, yeah, he's another one. Michael Strahan.
Okay.
Definitely. Texas Southern.
Yeah, I'm just, again, here, let's use a more recent one. Cooper Kupp.
I'm
just going to start throwing out every, smaller school guys.
Put him like an air raid offense. He put up some stupid numbers.
Willie weighs in. RG3, I don't know, because his Heisman year was his last year in college. He got drafted right after that. So I don't know if he would have garnered as much attention in the year prior to maybe be a sought after.
So I mentioned Clowney earlier as potentially, just because of just how much hype was around him and all it takes.
Circumstance.
Sure.
Think of someone that wasn't one of these smaller school guys, like a big name guy. Can you think of any? I know we mentioned some earlier, but maybe one that we didn't mention, like a big name guy that would have been like, whoa. Trying to think someone had like a big season and then next year school comes by and says, hey.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here.
And I'm putting you on the spot here.
I know.
Awesome radio. We all have to think.
I can't think too hard. It makes my head hurt.
I don't want to go the same route as Christian McCaffrey, but did Toby Gerhart have another year after he was a Heisman finalist?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. I think that might have been his senior year.
Okay.
Or at least last year of eligibility. Which he would have perfect one, though, even before that, because he did have a little bit of a trajectory before becoming a Heisman finalist. Those dudes at Stanford balled out for a few years.
Here's one. Would Ndamukong Suh have stayed at Nebraska if the option of paying him to go elsewhere? Because we knew he was a monster before his last year.
Oh, definitely.
I'm trying to recall how Nebraska was at that time.
I mean, they played for the Big 12 championship, but that was mainly on the back of him. I mean, it was one of the Martinez brothers, I'm sure, was quarterbacking at that time because they've been there for 14 years.
Was that his junior year? Senior year?
I think that was his junior year. Let me see.
I'm just wondering how they were, because I'll be honest with you, I can't remember what Nebraska did his freshman year.
I always forget how to spell his name.
Year.
Suh. Ndamukong Suh. Honestly, in terms of
S-U-H?
Dominant. Yeah, the last name's easy. Oh, I've completely butchered the first name, but let's see.
That would be a fun idea, is a college football spelling bee and trying to spell
he actually stayed in Nebraska for 5. He was in Nebraska for 5 years. He completed a full redshirt senior campaign. Which, by the way, how do you redshirt that guy his first year? Like, that's insane.
I'm looking at his measurements coming out of high school. He was a 4-star, 6'4", 275.
Wait a minute. So he must have got injured his first year because you couldn't redshirt if you played in any games. So I guess he got injured his first year. But still, the numbers he put up in the years since, like even coming out of his junior year in 2008, 7.5 sacks, 16 tackles for losses. Like, oh yeah, he would have gotten a ton of offers.
Yeah, because in 2006, his redshirt freshman season, that's when he went. He appeared in 14 games.
Right.
And started all. Nebraska went 9-5. That could be one of those years. Like, hey, you know what?
Maybe
this kid's going to be a starter. Maybe he hits the portal. Someone comes in with a bag.
You think Colt Brennan would have transferred from Hawaii?
Ooh.
He had some good roots, I guess. He was he was very connected to that university, but it would have been tempting. Somebody would have absolutely, probably the SEC or Big Ten, forked over a lot of money to try to pull that guy from the islands.
It would have needed to be the right fit. You know what I mean? Because obviously he didn't translate over to the NFL. He had a certain type of style with his quarterback play. I do think there would have been some other teams out there that would have given him a shot, though.
Yeah.
I wonder if
Mike Leach would try to poach him wherever he was.
We talked about the documentary series with Manti Te'o, Untold.
Yeah.
I wonder if after his freshman season, if he would have thought about transferring, say, to Southern Cal. By the way, Jack, we call it Southern Cal here. You're an alum of the university. How do I know that?
I'm supposed to make that mistake, not Jack.
Yeah, I'll pick on him a little bit because he said a couple times, and then West came in trying to save him.
Yeah.
But that could be one.
That's a good one.
Because, look, we see it happen in college sports, especially that freshman season, and granted, we see it now happen a lot more. You go somewhere, and it's just like, maybe I'm homesick or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And you would have stuck things out a little bit more just because like, hey, if I transfer and I go to one of these bigger schools, unless I have some type of exemption, I'm going to have to sit out.
Right.
So maybe a guy like Manti would have said, hey, you know what? Would be closer to the island. Let's do that. Because, he talked about in that documentary, Southern Cal was a school that he always dreamed of. He wanted to do something different, though.
Sure.
And he went out to Notre Dame. And
it was down to those two, right?
He said he's looking around on campus. He's on a Catholic campus, Catholic churches.
I don't think he'd ever worn a jacket in his entire life.
Right? just snow everywhere. And he's just like, I'm not in Kansas anymore.
No, you're definitely not. That's a good one. That certainly is. Again, if we really sat down and thought about this for a while, we could probably draft an entire
Jay Phillips
list
would
of
have
100
a good
people.
one, I bet.
He probably would. We can ask him when he comes in here. But no, that's like I said, Gillespie brought that up to me yesterday, and I couldn't not talk about it because it was such a captivating idea. And again, we could be here all day just doing our favorite thing, guys naming dudes of former players at the college level that could have transferred if the rules were the same.
This is a great road trip game.
Absolutely.
I could do that on Sunday.
I was going to say, you got a long road trip ahead of you, and I know it may be a while before we actually get you back in studio here, but certainly appreciate you hanging out this week, man.
Appreciate it. It's been awesome. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. It's the Halftime Show. He's Mike Uva from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head. Coming up next is the post-game show with Jay and Elijah on your Friday on the Game.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Absolutely.